Chapter 505 Daggered Pride. Meanwhile, within southern Hell's royal palace, winds of unrest kept the infernal nobility on tiptoes. And as Kron, Helmet, and Elia patiently sat within a meeting hall, entertained by 7 beauties, an unsettled Malcolm faced the imperturbable Talroth. "Royal Father, this is fishy. The Thonian primogen just died that his children are paying us a visit? Regardless of what their motive might be, it can only do us harm. How can you possibly welcome them?" Malcolm reasoned in a tone mixing gravity and frustration. Little did he expect that they'd receive a visit of that bastard branch so soon. The situation was indeed alarming. But while Malcolm's frown didn't conceal his worries, Talroth remained undisturbed. "Nonsense. How can I not welcome them? Must I wait for them to blast open my palace's gates before showing my hospitality?" Talroth replied in such a casual tone that Malcolm couldn't comprehend where his assurance came from. As far as he could remember, his father had always been this way. Nothing could shake him. He could smile, laugh, and jest, but neither rage nor fear ever flashed in his eyes. In the past, Malcolm used to find that trait remarkable, a proof of Talroth's supreme confidence in his ability to handle all things. But now, it seemed oddly unsettling. Would the world need to collapse before he lost his composure? Or was even that not enough? "Royal Father, I admire the calm with which you handle all situations. However, please think thrice. The brats and that unknown man's presence must hide a scheme. If your bastard wanted to kill us, he would not send his children. After all, they are but teenagers. I assume they want something from us. What do we have to offer to that bastard? Women. You may not care for your women, but I believe that you aside, no one in this palace is willing to offer his consorts bundled on a red carpet. Make your move, or I must take it upon myself to send them rolling," Malcolm declared. Although Talroth seemed hell-bent on letting Conrad run amok, there wasn't one demon prince willing to surrender to him. If push came to shove, they'd rather fight than compromise. But hearing this, Talroth nodded in approval and motioned toward the door. "Go then. But I must warn you, the unknown man you mentioned is his familiar. He may not be his equal, but I wouldn't be surprised if he could make an incubus skewer out of you in the blink of an eye," Talroth cautioned while still motioning for Malcolm to rush toward his destiny. "You." The demon prince trembled, barely able to restrain his ire. "Me what? If you want to fight, go fight. Don't disturb my cultivation over trifles. Otherwise, I might just kill you," Talroth leisurely replied. But though the tone seemed laced in jest, Malcolm didn't doubt that if he lingered for another second, his life was forfeit. Without further ado, he turned heels and bolted toward the 3 guests. Some must taste humiliation before sharpening their minds. What's so good about being a demon anyway? Within the meeting hall, though Kron and Helmet patiently waited Talroth's appearance, Elia dallied with the maids. "You know, my old man likes girls like you the most. Willow-waist and plump in all the right places. Cheap grandfather surely fed you well. Why not go back with me to the Jade Dynasty? I can guarantee you a radiant future," Elia pledged while taking down a glass of infernal liquor offered by the maids. For a second, the maids stopped to blink at the 14-year-old lad in disbelief. Never in their wildest dreams could they imagine anyone would dare speak such words in Talroth's palace. Finding the words reasonable, Kron pulled out a list of the things to snatch and added the maids to it. Helmet, however, shook his head. "What a disgrace." Helmet sighed. But at that time, the door flew open, bringing alongside it a gust of wind laced in demonic energies. The gust dispersed, and out of thin air, Malcolm appeared on the scene. His cold eyes swept the 3, going from Kron to Helmet and from Helmet to Elia. There, he stopped. "When His Majesty welcomed your impromptu visit with open arms, you dare dally with his maids. Is this the behavior guests ought to show? Or perhaps, those are the manners taught within the Jade Dynasty?" Malcolm inquired in a calm rebuke. Although that familiar strength was hard to fathom, if he showed weakness within his house, he might as well not show up. But as he awaited Kron's counterattack, Little did he expect Helmet's icy eyes to shift and lock onto him with a startling intensity. You must be retarded. Check your reflection in a mirror. Are the manners of a Thonian prince what a waste of your caliber can comment on? Laughable. This house must have fallen in dire straits to have you as its strongest prince. Helmet scoffed, causing both Kron and Elia's lips to curl into smiles. Malcolm, however, found no amusement in the words, and as they faced Helmet's icy gaze, his purple eyes shone with killing intent. What did you just say to this prince? If before, Malcolm kept his threatening tone veiled, he now failed to display such subtlety. And feeling the rising ire of the legendary god, the maids whose cultivation only stood at the minor goddess rank shivered in fright. Where did those three come from that they dared incur the wrath of a legendary god? Alas, when faced with Malcolm's display, Helmet didn't even bat an eyelid. Not just foolish, but also deaf. A pity that you've cultivated for 1,000,000 years, but only amount to this. Unless you wish to make a fool of yourself, get lost. This prince doesn't have time to waste on an underling. Helmet pursued, without paying Malcolm any more attention. Having never suffered such derision in 1,000,000 years of existence, for an instant, Malcolm stood dazed. Kron and Elia then snickered, making his fury near a feral outburst. How typical. You think that having your father's familiar is enough to protect you from all harm. So you dare act with such hubris. Ultimately, you are nothing more than a pampered young master relying on his father's might. Impressive. Malcolm countered with glaring sarcasm while anticipating Helmet's mood change. In his eyes, that bastard Branch's nephew was nothing more than a 16-year-old lad. How strong could he be? If not for Kron's presence, he would have long since pummeled him. Alas, the unexpected change never came. Instead, Helmet's lips curled into a smile while he eyed Malcolm from head to toe as if appraising a buffoon. What need is there to involve Uncle Kron for your level of goods? This prince can squash you with his middle finger. That was the last straw, and unable to endure more slights, Malcolm spoke the most unwise words of his existence. Why don't we bet on that? And having reached his goal, Helmet sneered at that incubus uncle's stupidity. Very well, but what are the stakes? This prince doesn't have time to swat flies for nothing. Helmet followed, and though he didn't seem to be sparing Malcolm a glance, from the corner of his eye, he could see the incubus prince's face contort in grimaces. According to his father's assessment, Malcolm's greatest flaw was his pride in his talent and bloodline strength, a pride he didn't allow anyone to threaten. For that reason, he didn't hesitate to ally with Surya in order to backstab Celine's father. Poking that pride was the most efficient way to goad him into action, and indeed, he couldn't resist. Chapter 506 swatted like a fly. Name your price. But if I win, I want your Jade Dynasty's core cultivation method. We shall cement this deal with a demonic contract, so don't even of weaseling your way out of it. If you wish to back off, now is the time. Malcolm replied and raised his right hand, releasing a large surge of demonic energies to start writing the contract. Fine, I agree. Although with your limited aptitude, you can never master it, if you could understand 1%, in the future, there would still be hope for you. But if I win, I want all your consorts alongside your brothers bundled and offered on a red carpet for my imperial father. Do you dare agree? Helmet inquired with a wolfish grin. If before, Malcolm stood with supreme confidence, when Helmet's words echoed in his mind, his hand and eyes trembled, if only for a second. If incubi were born tyrants, then their greatest shame was to have their consorts robbed by another man. In life, they could never tolerate such humiliation, and feeling Malcolm's reluctance, Helmet pursued. If you wish to back off, now is the time. Hearing his words hurled back at him, Malcolm no longer floundered, and with his right index, drew purple lines to write the demonic contract. His index moved like a blur, and by the time he finished, not even a second had passed. The two then cut open their fingers and signed the contract in their blood. The blood had yet to dry, that Malcolm stepped forward, letting the cultivation of an early-stage legendary god erupt alongside his light and time-wielding. Very well, follow me to a proper place, Malcolm ordered with soaring momentum. But little did he expect Helmet's following words to be unnecessary. For you, I don't even need to stand up. Innate skill, auspicious clouds, Helmet uttered, causing multicolored clouds to appear and swirl around his form, filling the meeting hall with crushing Empyrean might, all targeted at Malcolm. Instantly, he found himself losing his strength at a rapid pace, while his light and time law-wielding vanished into thin air. By the time his laws collapsed, Malcolm couldn't even muster the strength to truss up a chicken. His eyes widened in fright. How can this be? He stammered, unable to believe his eyes. How could such a dreadful ability possibly exist? And more importantly, why didn't his father warn him about it? Alas, Helmet didn't give him time to ponder the question. With a grasping motion, he released irresistible suction forces that pulled Malcolm toward him, smack, and with his right hand, swatted him like a fly. Malcolm's princely body smashed into the ceiling, shooting across the sky before tumbling somewhere beyond the royal palace. Alas, Helmet was only getting started. With another grasping motion, he pulled Malcolm from the ground, making him fly back into the meeting hall for a session of swatting. Smack, 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 smack. To the nearby maid's horror, Malcolm, a legendary god and the #1 talent of the second generation, was getting his cheeks swatted left and right by a 16-year-old teenager. He didn't even have the strength to struggle. In a flash, his lethally handsome face swelled like a pig's. But while Helmet smacked his uncle's cheeks on the side, Elia poured him some infernal tea. Elder brother, fattening pigs is a tedious task. You can't risk straining yourself. Please have some tea, Elia offered while extending the teacup toward the swatting Helmet. Oh, you're indeed our house's most sensible fellow, Helmet approved, and with his left hand, brought the teacup to his lips while with his right, he kept on swatting Malcolm. Smack, 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 smack. Under the relentless swatting, the demon prince's cheeks and lips swelled to outrageous proportions while his eyes sunk in, and his teeth flew in disarray. Only when the 10th tooth dropped did Helmet stop his flaming hand to clutch Malcolm's neck. Since you still need to seize your brother's consorts, this prince won't make things too difficult for you. According to hearsay, you're particularly picky about your harem members, and only choose those succubi, maenads, and lilims of the highest bloodline levels. Surely, Imperial Father will relish in those tributes. You have 15 minutes to prepare it all. Otherwise, it's not just your face you'll have to worry about, Helmet ordered, and with a casual swat, sent Malcolm flying past the door to crash in some alley of the royal palace. From beginning to end, Talroth didn't make an appearance, and taking their lord's condition as an excuse, the terror-stricken maids rushed past the door to run far, far away from those monstrous guests. Meanwhile, Helmet, Elia, and Kron exchanged mental messages. Uncle Kron, what do you think? Helmet inquired while folding his arms beneath his chest. It's too early to make a judgment. On this trip, Malcolm is but a side dish. Our main task is to figure out the nature of Tauratha's heart and relay our information to Master. But I must admit that until now, the situation appears quite troubling. Kron replied in a message that echoed within the two princes' minds. The words caused Elias' face to contort into a frown. I don't understand. Tauroth has made no move. For all intent and purposes, he does not just appear accommodating but seems willing to endure all our excesses. Why is it that troubling? A perplexed Elia asked in another silent message. That is the problem. The less response he gives, the more we should be worried. At that time, within the royal palace's undergrounds, Talroth sauntered toward a secluded chamber. There, he cleft open space, creating a purple spatial door behind which another world lay. Talroth stepped in, and the spatial door closed behind him. Though in the outside, Hell's crimson sun still hung. In that new world, a moonless, starry night awaited. A vast expanse of land stretched as far as the eyes could see. But in that land, only one dark purple tower stood. With a step, Talroth vanished, reappearing within the tower's highest floor where two women stood bound against amethyst pillars. Though the two seemed endowed with a divine beauty their shackles couldn't suppress, one rippled with a feral bloodthirst and a yearning for savagery that made even her chains shiver, while the other, well, with a beauty and sex appeal that reached empyrean perfection, words failed to give her justice. And as Talroth walked in, she raised her irresistible purple eyes toward him, shaking her head to dispel the long, black curls that clouded her vision. "Isn't it my royal husband? Talroth, after so many eons, what brings you here?" Asmodeus inquired with a smile that in the past disarmed all deities, all, except for the man standing before her, her beloved king consort. And as her words echoed, the green-haired demoness by her side trembled, and her dark green eyes opened wide, gleaming with killing intent. Talrith, Slyvaz, the Zenith Ant Primogen, all believed dead, snarled with billowing resentment. Talroth, however, faced them with a smile. "Ladies, long time no see. Apologies, but it appears that I am suffering my good son's inquisition. To placate his worries and mend the bridges between us, I have no choice but to make an irresistible offering," Talroth explained in a perfectly relaxed tone. Chapter 507: Suppressing Dissidents. Meanwhile, the Sea Dream Temple's leaders welcomed Conrad's return with bared arms. For the first time in their eons of history, the elders united not to slay an enemy, but one bearing the same mantle. Conrad hadn't even taken 3 steps into the core zone, that the 5 Mara elders encircled him, all rippling with terrifying killing intent. "Rudra, at first we believed you could be a talent worth nurturing. But soon you revealed yourself as a source of wanton depravity that not only clouded Rathi's vision but threatens to ruin our cracked foundation. For the sake of the Sea Dream Temple, even if we risk execution, we have no other choice but to destroy you. However, if you surrender the Moon Refining Palace slaves, destroy your cultivation, and leave this sect, we can give you a way out," the former law-enforcing elder declared with the backing of the other 5. None of them was duped. Just like the sect's treasury was now that Rudra's property, those slaves obtained from the auction would become his personal force. With the status of High Elder, control of the sect's resources, and a new, controlled force that rivaled the Sea Dream Temple in its heydays, it didn't take a genius to realize that in the future, the Sea Dream Temple would become his plaything. By the time Daksha's wounds healed, it might be too late. None yearned for such an outcome. And although the 5 had given up on their human lineage to become Devis, it didn't mean they would just follow the wind. The Sea Dream Temple wasn't just Daksha's. It was the result of all their hard work, sweat, and blood. Never could they allow it to fall into the hands of that junior. Alas, little did they know that as they raised their god artifacts and offered an ultimatum, Conrad, who saw through their minds, inwardly sneered. "Suicidal fleas," Conrad scoffed, and stretched out his right index, causing formless truth laws to assail the 5's minds. Feeling the irresistible might of those truth laws, the 5's eyes widened in disbelief. "You are not how," the former law enforcement elder stammered before the words died in his throat, and in sync, the 5 elders dropped on their knees. "I can indeed no longer allow you to hinder my business. Since you won't behave, let me help you." Echoing Conrad's words, the 5 kowtowed toward him, with none of their defiant selves remaining. "Greetings, master," they said in tandem, and their voices teemed with a reverence they'd never showed to even Daksha. At that time, in swirling magenta haze, Rathi appeared on the scene, and as she swept the prostrated elders, she couldn't help but sigh. "It's not like they weren't getting on your nerves," Conrad began with a disarming smile, while motioning for the 5 elders to rise from the ground. But hearing this, Rathi shook her head in exasperation. "That's not the point." Although they were quite persistent, their opposition made this whole masquerade believable. Now that they've turned into your puppets, it won't be long before Kama questions your existence. Surya follows, and trouble knocks on our doorsteps. I would not be surprised if he already began investigating you. Rathi heaved a long sigh that only brightened Conrad's smile. "Our doorsteps, huh? Good that you know where you stand. But don't worry, they being my puppets simply ensures I determine how they oppose me. As for your husband, when his life is in jeopardy, I'm afraid he won't have the time to find anything useful." Conrad replied before walking past the kowtowing elders. Like trained soldiers, they stood up and returned to their temples. But as he reached her, Rithi's face contorted into a frown. "You can't harm him," Rithi declared in a firm, uncompromising stance. But before that defense, Conrad merely chuckled. "Me? Oh no, you will be the one doing the harming," Conrad replied and leaned in. In about 1 week, announce Daksha's death and watch a beautiful play ensue. "I'm sure you will like it. What to do is entirely up to you," Conrad whispered in Rithi's left ear before moving past her. "In the meantime, announce my promotion and tell the entire celestial world that Rudra, the Sea Dream Temple's High Elder, takes ownership of the second mountain to establish his sect, the Myriad Dreams Valley," Conrad instructed before vanishing alongside his ladies. Elders establishing their own branches was a common matter. Kama and Rithi aside, all possessed based on a celestial mountain owned by the Sea Dream Temple. Though she'd long since realized sect establishment was one of Conrad's goals, she still couldn't figure out his plot. Not that it mattered. Right now, his previous words held more weight. Would he dare? Rithi wondered while referring to Kama. Her lips curved into a smile, and she closed her eyes. Of course, why would he not? She whispered before vanishing in a gust of magenta haze. The grand declaration of Rudra's creation as High Elder followed, alarming all disciples throughout the Sea Dream Temple. If before they believed his quick rise a result of innate talent, they now couldn't help but believe in the circulating rumors of an illicit affair between the acting Temple Lord and the new Elder. Who could imagine that even the magnificent Rithi could fall for a honey trap? How disgraceful! Some disgruntled male disciples whispered, feeling sorry for Kama, who now felt the green on his head becoming glossier. Still, he didn't lose his composure, stifled the rage to plan his counterattack. According to his estimations, Daksha wouldn't survive the next week. At that time, he could coordinate with his brother to suppress all within the Sea Dream Temple. Even if that Rudra was a legendary god in disguise, before Surya, he couldn't raise any storm. But little did he expect Rithi to follow with a personal announcement of that Rudra's new sect. In his capacity as Sea Dream Elder, Rudra shall, in 2 weeks, establish his sect on the second celestial mountain. All are welcome to attend as guests or potential disciples. The Myriad Dreams Valley welcomes all talents regardless of race and background. This time, the announcement echoed throughout the celestial world, inviting all to attend the inauguration ceremony. Chapter 508 Destiny Gathering Veins. Rithi's announcement rang like a thunderclap in the ears of the various factions and rogue cultivators throughout heavens. According to unspoken agreements, the cardinal and divine sects usually restrained their sect recruitment to their personal domains. Having one invite all throughout heavens was a wholly unheard of. Even Surya didn't dare. At the same time, the news of that Rudra's new status spread like wildfire, making many reconsider their options. That Rudra is the celestial world's #1 rising star. With Rithi's unconditional support, with the ownership of 280,000 sages and 8,000 deities bound by soul rewiring seals, in the future, he is doomed to become a new hegemon. Who knows, perhaps by the time Daksha returns from seclusion, the Sea Dream Temple will have a new owner. By the time? I'm afraid the change is already in effect. With his current influence and Rithi's support, he's Temple Lord in all but name. Those Mara elders can only swallow their spite. I'm afraid it's not that simple. In this matter, many are forgetting that the Primal Sun sect is being shamed at every turn. Be it in the auction or Kama's glaring humiliation, Surya will not let this slide. A clash is inevitable. Don't forget that in the current celestial world, he remains the only unharmed primogen. So what? Primogen battle and sect battles are two different concepts. If the Moon Refining Palace didn't have to face the pressure of 11 primogens and the Warden's silent bias, they could never fall that easily. This is an opportunity to snatch. Join them while they're weak, and on the day of their rise, you shall reap massive benefits. Reasonings, thoughts and counter-thoughts ran amok within the celestial world, with some advocating neutrality and others a firm stance. But while many awaited its move, the Primal Sun sect made no comment. The rogue cultivators' thoughts were simpler. The branch's standards would undoubtedly be a step below the main sect's. However, the resources at its disposal were hard to fathom. Although many believed the Sea Dream Temple was financially weakened by its auction, their new sages and deities were by themselves critical resources. Who knew how they would use them? Moreover, the Sea Dream Domain's trillions of citizens and hundreds of sects provided vast income. It wouldn't be long before they were back on their feet. Many disciples of weaker sects held the same view, and before Conrad even started the preparations, legions headed toward the Sea Dream City to await the Myriad Dreams Valley's inauguration. Meanwhile, Conrad took ownership of the second mountain, whose spiritual energies only lost to the first where the main sect stood. Theoretically, the second mountain existed solely for Ruthy's use. However, having neither intention nor need for a subsect, she only used to plant god medicines. The concentration of spiritual energy in this place isn't much worse than the Sea Dream Temples. Once we construct the spiritual veins and control the repartition, building a better core zone than the Sea Dream Temples is not impossible. Verena appraised with an approving nod. All sects, regardless of scale, relied on spiritual veins to control the flow of spiritual energy in the area. The Myriad Dreams Valley would be no different. However, little did the world know that under those spiritual veins, Conrad would also construct destiny-gathering veins. As the name implied, those veins would gather the very destiny of the celestial world, robbing all its lives of their fate-assigned chances while covertly enfeebling heaven's will. Better, all the opportunities and inheritances meant to appear throughout heaven would only sprout within the Myriad Dreams Valley. Using the gathered destiny, Conrad could also refine heaven-swallowing pills, pellets whose formula he established to use the entire realm as the foundation to enhance the strength of not only himself but his forces at an alarming rate. However, he wouldn't be able to complete them before his seclusion. "Let's get started," Conrad ordered, and stretched out his hands, causing 10,000 god jades to appear within the sky. On those jades, Conrad willed esoteric runes. The god jade then dived into the ground surrounding the mountain from underneath and raising a clouding mist formation that prevented any peeping. Having long since reached the level of formation god, even without his laws, there were many things Conrad could do. And seeing the gray mist rising around the second mountain, preventing all his observations, Kama's eyes narrowed. So he's also a formation god. And judging from this formation's quality, around 7 stars. How hateful. Kama spat. Meanwhile, Conrad's work carried on. As his right index drew invisible signs on in the air, he modified the mountain's geography, creating and morphing lines of spiritual veins within. With his free hand, he joined hands with Verena, supplying her with his formidable energy as she drew the ethereal destiny-gathering veins beneath the spiritual ones. If the creation of spiritual veins didn't take Conrad more than 10 seconds, the destiny-gathering veins, however, took a lot more time. Conrad estimated 7 days of hard work. Having other tasks to fulfill, he split into the 3 devils. The Fate Devil assisted Verena, while the Truth Devil erected the Myriad Dream Valley's various buildings and cultivation abodes. Conrad didn't forget to shift the Sea Dream Temple's treasury to his. Meanwhile, the main body tackled a just as critical issue: Devil Pill refining. While the Valkyrie assisted the Truth Devil in his constructions, Conrad took Heidi and Cassilia into his new pill refining hall. To Kalia's shock, Conrad and Hyde's appearances changed to revert to their original selves. But while Hyde's was just a shift in skin tone and eye color, Conrad's underwent startling changes that forced Cassilia's mouth into an O shape while her eyes widened in disbelief. Seeing this, Heidi covered the astounded girl's mind with her hand. "Hey, even if you're stunned by Dad's Empyrean looks, you can't make it so glaring. Otherwise, how can he respect you? TSK, TSK, TSK. Minor league player." Heidi chided with an impish grin, causing Cassilia to snap out of her torpor. But little did she expect Cassilia's reply to be, "One should live true to their heart. Master is supremely handsome, unparalleled in the past, present, or future. As his disciple, how can I not make him aware of this truth? That would not only go against my conscience, but show an unfilial and disloyal heart." Cassilia countered, causing Hyde's expression to undergo a 180-degree turn. "Arg, I underestimated you. Good, the competition should be more interesting." Heidi nodded in approval, while an amused Conrad summoned a jet-black cauldron rippling with vast devil force. Chapter 509, Grand Devil Pills. As the founder and perfecter of devil alchemy, Conrad's skills in that area stood leagues above that of any other practitioners. Moreover, unlike the rest, he could make use of his truth and life embodiment, as well as his infiniteness insight to magnify the results. Conrad raised his right hand, causing an eruption of black devil flames to soar from the cauldron. If before, Cassilia merely believed Conrad to be an eccentric deity, the eruption of eldritch energies convinced her otherwise. Something else, something more she couldn't appraise. What we cultivate is the devil road. In devil cultivation, innate talent is secondary. The foundation is the heart. Without an inflexible Tao heart, don't even dream of becoming a devil. At every level, your heart will face challenges. If you wave, at best you will stop breaking through. At worst, your devil heart will devour you and turn you into a loose devil puppet. Such cases are not unheard of. Conrad explained while summoning 2 spatial bags containing all the male devis, nature spirits, Naga, and moon spirit slaves at his disposal. The 2 bags hovered above the cauldron, whose billowing black flames brushed it from below. Devil cultivation thrives on the fell. It gathers all vices, negativity, and is the most callous, depraved, and destructive form of cultivation in the omniverse. Coincidentally, it is also the strongest road, and will remain so until someone manages to crush my bridge and establishes a new firmament bridge. As Conrad spoke, the 2 bags curved so that their openings faced the cauldron's blazing flames. The bags opened, released the first waves of ingredients. To Cassilia's fright, the 2 bags released waves upon waves of male cultivators, devis and spirits from sages to half-step legendary gods. A minority had already fallen, but the rest appeared very much alive, as shown by their howls as they tumbled into the flames of the underworld. And though the screams were short-lived, the scene of hundreds of thousands of lives tumbling into a cauldron of billowing black flames shocked Cassilia to the core of her soul, and alarmed, she staggered. But before she could backpedal, Hyde's hand stopped her back, holding her firmly where she stood. "If you can't even take this, you should forget about remaining my father's disciple and beg him to let you go somewhere far, far away," Heidi declared in a straightforward tone that Conrad didn't contradict. For an instant, Cassilia lowered her head. True, she didn't wish to remain this frail human girl unable to fight back against oppression. True, she held the world in disdain. But unlike Heidi, she didn't grow up in the Imperial Jade Palace and didn't possess the Thonian lineage that made everything so much simpler to accept. Her forbidden physique aside, she was a normal person. Normal people didn't just welcome the fall of legions. Her humanity screamed against the ongoing deeds. Sensing the inner struggle, while his hands flashed in incantation gestures and guided the legions of sacrifices refinement, Conrad chimed in. "Think about what you wish the most, about your highest aspirations and desires. Then weigh them with the lives falling before you. Ask yourself how and why their fall matters to you, and compare it all on the balance of your soul. If you can't crush their worth, I can give you a way out." Drinking Conrad's instructions, Cassilia closed her eyes and sought within her heart what she yearned for the most. Power, freedom, respect, all swirled within, circling the face of her master and savior. Perhaps because she owed him this second chance at life, perhaps because all those relied on his guidance, perhaps she merely wished to learn all he had to offer, or maybe he was too damn riveting. But Conrad's face became the center of Cassilia's aspirations. She didn't want to betray his expectations, to let go of the hand that pulled her out of eternal damnation. He mattered. But then the echo of those crumbling souls followed, and Cassilia wondered what worth they held. If she didn't witness their fall but hear of it instead, she'd merely heave a sigh of sorrow. Never would she lose sleep over it. They were unrelated digits whose fates had nothing to do with her. If their sacrifices allowed her to stay closer and longer by her master's side, what did it matter? The side landed on the balance of her soul, and Conrad crushed all the rest. Only he mattered. And if that made her a monster, so be it. At that time, a dark purple seed appeared in Cassilia's heart. But instead of blossoming into a flower, the seed shrank, and with every bit that vanished, dark purple energies filled Cassilia's heart, transforming it into something else, something more. A devil heart, but as if oblivious to the explosive waves of nefarious energies filling her veins, Cassilia dropped onto the ground and bowed toward Conrad. Master, please forgive your disciple for this moment of hesitation. Your disciple swears to live and die only by you. Cassilia pledged before smacking her head in a kowtow. But before her forehead reached the ground, an irresistible force stopped it and lifted her back up. Who wants you to die? I want you to live well, to live a radiant and splendid life stretching throughout eternity. Conrad replied while turning the sacrifices into medicinal properties and compacting it all within the swirling devil flames to produce a batch of pills. Heidi stared at the refining process with rapt attention, taking mental notes of her father's flame and energy manipulations to better her own skills. Meanwhile, Cassilia straightened her back, and as she stared at Conrad, she couldn't help but smile in a slightly foolish-looking grin while her cheeks flushed red. Humph! Heidi snorted while keeping her eyes fixed on Conrad's refining techniques. That junior sister is indeed dangerous. If I'm not careful, she might beat me to the supreme prize. I must redouble my efforts. Heidi inwardly pledged. The refining reached a critical moment, and to magnify the result 10,000 folds, Conrad injected the highest concentration of truth, life, and infiniteness at his disposal. Boom! The billowing black flames shrank back into the cauldron, which released one ringing explosion. Black smoke now soared toward the ceiling, and from that smoke, thousands of black pills appeared in the air, hovering above the cauldron in organized rings and announcing the refining success. But while the uncultured Cassilia didn't find anything strange in the scene, Heidi couldn't believe her eyes. 12,12540 grand devil pills, 12,000 mid-grade, 500 high-grade, and 40 top-grade grand devil pills? Just with that material? Heidi stammered, unable to comprehend the result. Although hundreds of thousands of lives went into the pill refining, more than 280,000 were sages, while the gods numbered less than 6,000. And of those 6,000, only 15 stood at the ancestral level or above. How could he produce such a staggering amount of grand devil pills? How astounding! Father is indeed almighty. In this world, none can compare to him. Heidi swooned in fangirl mode. Chapter 5 10 Tauratha's Staggering Gifts. Conrad's pill refining had barely come to an end, that Kron's voice echoed within his mind. Master, we've just completed the operation. However, I dare not comment on the result. Please give your appraisal. Kron requested in a mental message while filling Conrad's mind with the events that unfolded following his arrival in Tauratha's palace. By the time the transmission ended, Conrad's eyes widened in disbelief. He didn't dare, Conrad muttered, unable to believe his eyes. He dared. Initially, Master wished to determine a simple fact, whether Tauroth had emotions or not. If he did, the investigation stopped there. If he didn't, I was meant to figure out the cause. On that topic, I have mixed feelings. Tauroth most likely misses a lot of the average person's emotional spectrum. More accurately, he doesn't have the negative parts. Anger, sorrow, fear, disgust. I can say with 90% certainty that those do not inhabit him. But things such as joy, amusement, and surprise do reside in him, if only in small amounts. I'm sure that even in his wildest dreams, Malcolm would have never expected his father to castrate and offer him his eunuch. Kron replied, and indeed, those were the facts. Following his soul-breaking thrashing at Helmet's hands, Malcolm couldn't resist the contract and was forced to offer not only his consorts but his brothers. But thinking himself clever, he planted self-destruction seals within them all, ready to detonate the bombs when they left the royal palace. The move didn't escape Kron's vision, but before he could act, Talroth not only stopped Malcolm, but gelded him on the spot. The move sent the royal palace into an uproar. Little did they know that Talroth was only getting started. Right afterward, he summoned the Batet, the primogen whose demon race bore her name, and suppressed her within the throne room. Throughout the higher realms, all knew of Bastet's eternal devotion toward Talroth. Never did anyone expect that such would be her fate. Talroth then gathered his daughters, the Zenith Ant Primogen, Slivaz, alongside hundreds of consorts and thousands of maids to present in a grand offering. At that time, to say nothing of the demon princes, even Kron was scared out of his wits, not knowing how to handle the situation. Talrotha's words still echoed within his mind. This is but a starting gift. So long as Conrad wants something, he can have it. If he gives the order, and I can crusade against the other demon kings to rob them of their consorts. My only request is that he leaves me some face, and lets me keep my wife. After all, even an old goat such as I need someone to keep me company. Faced with such words, Kron didn't know how to be more excessive, and with 2 primogens alongside thousands of succubi, maenads, and lilims to offer, how could he? At the end of the day, robbing beauties was just an excuse. If Talroth was sincere in his surrender, but they insisted on persecuting him, they might as well drop all pretense and behead him where he stood. Of course, Conrad never cared for Talrotha's sincerity. He didn't even care for his plots and planning. Only one thing worried him. Is Talroth somehow related to celestial slaughter? Yes or no? This was the critical issue, an issue that could fill even Conrad with headaches. Talrotha's desire to destroy Hells will had long since become evident to Conrad. That by itself was nothing inconceivable. However, if Talroth possessed the Conqueror's will, or rather, if the Conquerors will possess Talroth, then it was a whole other matter. Celestial slaughter and the Conqueror's will were one, the latter born from the former's mastery of the Supreme Conqueror Sutra. Both existed within nothingness. Tracing them was a task that left regretless best efforts stumped. The only thing they knew for sure was that on his rebirth, celestial slaughter would either return on the place of his birth or his death. Although the realm geography experienced drastic changes, both Conrad and the firmament's troublemakers knew the locations of those 2 places, heaven or hell. Heaven and Hell's will were so much different from the previous mortal realm because they were chains. Regretless preventive measure to keep celestial slaughter shackled, should he be reborn as a demon or deva. The scheme could work because those 2 were flawed races with their roots in regretless heaven and Hell's wills. For the few nature spirits and humans, that was more complicated. For humans and nature spirits, regretless left a lure, the god executing immortal sword. Only those ancient races could claim the sword. The likes of the demons and devas were too flawed to have the qualifications. However, nature spirits craved peace and harmony. If one ever sought the god executing immortal sword, Regretless didn't doubt that that one would be Celestial Slaughter's reincarnation. As for the humans, he only had to examine the emotional spectrum of those that sought the sword to make his judgment. The god executing immortal sword was one of the 3 supreme artifacts of the Omniverse, the one born from infiniteness. Even a nothingness supreme could fall to its might, but as a result, the blade would shatter. Alas, its sentience and hatred for Regretless made it impossible for him or his kin to ever wield it in battle. Regretless didn't fear Celestial Slaughter's incoming strength. He feared another reincarnation. If he could never raise an indefiniteness supreme, Plan B was to use both the threat and appeal the sword represented to lure Celestial Slaughter and seal him for good. Conrad held the same concerns. Even if the reincarnation of his past self's father stood before him, he couldn't kill him. It was a pointless endeavor that would bring back a stronger enemy. Either he sealed him, or destroyed him once and for all, preferably the latter. Tauratha's eagerness to get rid of Hells will force Conrad to consider the possibility that perhaps, just perhaps, he was both his present and past father. Fortunately, the result was negative. If he were celestial slaughter, he wouldn't just have an incomplete emotional spectrum. As long as the conqueror's will stands, emotions and desires vanish to make place for an entity driven solely by logic and the need to conquer. Taurath can't be him. Conrad rationalized with his eyes shut close. And back in hell, Kron nodded in approval. But that doesn't mean they aren't related. Have the state protectors keep Taurath under close watch, and bring me his gifts. Since he dares offer them, I dare accept them. Let him some breathing space for now. When the 3 realms are pacified, we shall pluck her. Conrad ordered, and without delay, Kron executed the orders, first dispatching a state protector to spy on Taurath from the shadows before bringing the 2 princes back to Yvonne, Else, and Guliston's side. That done, he vanished to reappear by Conrad's side, this time startling both Heidi and Cassilia. "Master, please receive the haul," Kron exclaimed while extending an amethyst ring toward Conrad. And as he swept its content, although he already knew what lay therein, Conrad was still impressed by the legions of beauties awaiting. Chapter 511 Profound Infiniteness Inside. Good job. If before, I didn't have full assurance, now I do not doubt that I should exceed the peak of the Grand Devil Realm, and take half a step into the Prime Devil Realm. After refining my heaven-swallowing pills, reaching the Prime Devil Realm will not take any trouble. Conrad praised with a satisfactory nod before taking the ring from Kron's hands. "Serving Master is my honor and duty," Kron exclaimed while straightening his back. His eyes then shifted to the left, falling on Heidi and Cassilia who stood nearby. Seeing him, Heidi waved with glee. "How have you been, Uncle Kron? Please tell me you regularly give Elia a few swats." Heidi greeted with a jovial smile while Cassilia's eyes narrowed at the newcomer. "Uncle? Is he Master's brother? Or is that just a form of familiarity? A disciple or a servant? Otherwise, why would he call him Master?" They do share similar traits." Cassilia wondered while comparing the icy blue eyes, snow-white skin and hair shared by both Conrad and Kron. But as her eyes locked on Kron's, his too met her gaze. "I've been well, Your Highness. And even if I don't, Her Majesty is always ready to give the second prince a few swats," Kron replied while examining the new recruit. Feeling the devil energies surging from her chest, he could feel she'd just completed her devil conversion and become a devil. But that aside, her Tao foundation was non-existent, like a complete newbie to the cultivation road. In heaven and hell where those no longer existed, this was indeed hard to comprehend. Conrad then sent him a mental message, and Kron's eyes widened in a stupor. Without hesitation, he bowed toward Cassilia. "Greetings, young mistress. Being handpicked to inherit Master's teachings is the good fortune accumulated by 10,000 lives. Do cherish it," Kron exclaimed, dispelling the flickering confusion within Cassilia's eyes while triggering new questions. But knowing that losing herself in thoughts would just fry her brain, Cassilia didn't probe further and bowed back. "Thank you. I will take those words to heart." Meanwhile, Conrad closed his eyes for a brief calculation. "Kron, you can return to the infernal realm. Leave the state protectors with Yvonne, Else, and Guliston to personally spy on Taurath. Also, send them these pills," Conrad ordered as his eyes opened wide. With a wave of his hand, 80 grand devil pills flew toward Kron. 30 mid-grade, 15 high-grade, and 5 top-grade. Seizing them, Kron bowed in compliance. Conrad then cleft open a realm gash, allowing Kron to covertly rush back to the infernal realm. It was now time to kick things up a notch. Carrying the pills and girls alongside him, Conrad vanished to reappear in another building of the new sect, the Blood Lake Hall. But while from the outside, the onlooker could only see an ordinary mansion, inside, a vast oceanic realm awaited, with warm water stretching across 145,000 square miles. This was clearly a result of truth and space manipulations. With a wave of his hand, Conrad summoned the bodies of the 6 divine lords fallen in the essence nurturing forest and tossed them into the sea. His hands flashed in incantation gestures. The 6 corpses burst into a blood fog that stretched throughout the lake and colored it in blood. At the same time, Conrad summoned 1 billion godjade from the treasury, organizing them at the bottom of the sea in an intricate devil formation, while 9 black devil seals appeared in the sky. The spiritual energy within the air and blood lake morphed into devil essence, making this place a perfect environment for devil cultivation. Without further ado, Conrad summoned his legions, and Cassilia was startled to see the 96,000 devils appear out of thin air. Led by the 12 Thonian dukes, the legions knelt before their lord. "Greetings, your majesty." 96,000 voices boomed in perfect sync. "You may rise. Although your cultivation speed doesn't bring shame to my banner, it must rise to another level. I've altered the time flow in this area to make 1 day in the outside equal 3,000 here. You have 115 years to reach the highest cultivation level you can. The lake is a miraculous cultivation trove that will not only benefit you, but enhance your devil puppets. Meanwhile, pills have been prepared as rewards the 8,000 most outstanding performances. Cultivate, breakthrough, fight, and repeat. The State Warding and Blood Shadow Dukes will be in charge of the resource distributions. The Silent Blade and True Martial Duchesses of the War Drilling. Should you require more resources, the Hidden Moon Duchess can reach out to me. Whoever hasn't reached the Boundless Sea Devil Realm by the end of this cultivation session will be executed. Meanwhile, Thonian Knights must reach the mid-stage, Thonian Generals the late stage, and Thonian Lords the peak. As for you Dragon Dukes, if you've not at least broken through to the early stage of the Grand Devil Realm, you can kill yourselves. Once you complete the session, you and your puppets shall masquerade as the fallen disciples of the Moon Refining Palace and fill the sect," Conrad declared. But though his words wrought immense pressure on them all, none dared complain, and all agreed with thundering determination. "As you command, your majesty." As for the various dukes and duchesses, they represented the leadership of the 12 pavilions. Wolfgang was the State Warding Duke, Birkin the Blood Shadow Duke, Chimera the Silent Blade Duchess, Vilcia the True Martial Duchess, and Callisto the Hidden Moon Duchess. All were pillars of the dynasty. Without any additional directives to give, Conrad vanished to reappear within the new Valley Lord's palace. There, he had both Heidi and Cassilia sit cross-legged. "From now on, and until the recruitment ceremony officially begins, I will direct the 2 of you's cultivation. Naturally, since your foundations aren't the same, the curriculum will be different. After the ceremony, you will follow me into seclusion for rapid progress," Conrad declared, making Cassilia, who didn't understand the meaning behind the words, respond with a vigorous nod of approval. Heidi, however, leaped from elation. "Yeez!" Startled by the sudden squeal, Cassilia recoiled and blinked in disbelief while Conrad rolled his eyes. In the following 2 weeks, he spent his time between concocting super devil pills, erecting devil trees, ponds, lakes, and instructing his daughter and disciple on the devil road. Heidi, who due to the Boundless Sea Devil pill she refined was already on the verge of the next level, broke through to the peak of the Heart Devil realm. Meanwhile, Verena and the Fate Devil carried on with the Destiny Gathering Veins constructions, and by the time they completed it, the second Celestial Mountain had already turned into a cultivation paradise, or rather, a devil paradise. And following a week of refining hundreds of thousands of pills, through an exhausting combination of infiniteness, insight, and primal laws, even before the seclusion, the shackles of profound infiniteness insight lessened, announcing a breakthrough. Now, only 1 week remained. But within the Sea Dream Temple, a commotion arose. To the shocked elders and new protectors, Rithi announced Daksha's death. Elated by the news, Kama used his ring to contact Surya in his seclusion. To Ruthi's disappointment, the two settled on a plan to overturn the Sea Dream Temple during Conrad's sect inauguration. Another week flew by. And as the sect inauguration was about to start, Conrad broke through to profound infiniteness insight. At the same time, his legionaries emerged from seclusion, all rippling with heaven-shaking devil energies. Chapter 5, 12 Disciple Recruitment Ceremony. Throughout the celestial world, all, regardless of background, are welcome. This was the first time such a disciple recruitment ceremony occurred within heaven, the first time cultivators of all sides, lineages, and ranks gathered without discrimination to attend the same event. Millions of prospective disciples swarmed the Sea Dream City, cramming their way toward the temple's second celestial mountain now occupied by the Myriad Dreams Valley. But they weren't the only ones. Honored guests from the various divine and cardinal sects now filled the Sea Dream Temple's halls, awaiting the ceremony's start. But while the rogue cultivators and disciples of low-level sects saw this as the opportunity of a lifetime, high-ranking sect tycoons scoffed at the riffraff this event gathered. This move reeks desperation. How could a reputable sect welcome anyone? Clearly, this high elder wishes to use quantity to make up for non-existent quality. A short, brown-haired man scoffed at the Myriad Dreams sect's move. He was Kabura, Terra's elder brother, and the Divine Earth Temple's new master. Most high-ranking deities agreed. Although their previous recruitment practices indeed discriminated against other lineages and left many talents unable to carve out a future for themselves, at the very least, they maintained high standards. Among the Devis and spirits filling their sects, talentless peons didn't exist. The majority could, in a given time, reach the limit of their bloodline. But with that Rudra's system, even good-for-nothings with minimal cultivation talents and no hope to reach godhood dared show themselves. Waves upon waves, each bringing in millions of prospective disciples, cluttered those high-ranking deities, filling them with surging waves of contempt. One, however, disagreed. You misunderstand. Those millions of prospective disciples are the pool. A pool that represents unimaginable potential. Now you look at those with low talent, but ignore the ones with sky-high comprehension abilities. Without witnessing Rudra's recruitment process, how can you make a judgment? I wager that across this pool of tens of millions, he might not pick more than 1%. A golden-haired youth replied while his eyes, as scorching as the sun, stared at the incoming contestants. He was Pandu, Surya's eldest son, and the new great elder of the Primal Sun sect. Leaders such as Kabura and Pandu didn't appear during the auction. Therefore, Conrad had yet to take control of them. Not that it mattered. Right now, from prospective disciples to guest deities, all eyes stared at the clouded mountain behind which heaven's new hot topic lay. That mist alone proved that the new Myriad Dreams Valley possessed the backing of top formation gods. Some believed that Rudra handpicked one from his moon-refining palace slaves, while others pointed fingers at Ruthi. Only Pandu, who received Kama's intel, knew Rudra to be the formation god behind this sublime work. If only for those skills, the Primal Sun sect would have been willing to offer him an elder position. A pity that his name now echoed humiliation for Kama, Pandu's very own uncle. And thinking about the incoming play, he couldn't help but sneer. The mist dispersed, revealing a pearl-white mountain soaring with vast celestial energies. Dazzling magenta rays shafted through the clouds, coalescing in a magenta orb that seized all eyes and eclipsed heaven's beauty. From that orb, Conrad, in his Mara disguise, descended alongside his male Nagas and moon spirit servants, dropping with peerless elegance and suspending himself 100 feet above the mountain's highest tower. Ladies and gentlemen, deities from all sides, welcome to my Myriad Dreams Valley's inauguration. Though my Myriad Dreams Valley may have hundreds of recruitment ceremonies, there will only be one inauguration. As Valley Lord, it is my delight to see so many friends gather to honor it. Thank you. Conrad began with a polite bow, a bow the gathered elites and leaders immediately returned. Although many of them hid treacherous motives, this wasn't the proper time to give no consideration for face. Inwardly, Conrad sneered. The rules are simple. My Myriad Dreams Valley prepared 9 passes for you to cross. All lead to the valley's inner court. Whoever can reach it shall become my Myriad Dreams Valley's new disciple. You have 3 hours, Conrad declared and waved his hand, causing a surge of magenta light to split the contestants into 9 groups to challenge the passes. That's simple. Some couldn't help but ask. Although the mountain was high of 8,000 kilometers, on the scene, the weakest were still star-fusing saints. How could that possibly stump them? Of course, those were fools' remarks. The astute soon realized that the passes couldn't be that easily traveled. A gravity play? Illusions? Mind control and infighting? In a way or another, the many would be eliminated to leave the few behind. And indeed, they were right. Well, almost. The passes were all laced in a devil formation that tested a single thing: the Tao heart. The stronger the Tao heart, the easier the travel would be. However, even those with strong hearts wouldn't find it simple. Without a heart as solid as a rock, there was no way to reach the top. But once they did, the devil formation would link their soul to Conrad's will, thereby making them loyal followers. That's simple. Best of luck to you, Conrad replied, and alongside his disguised legionaries, vanished to return within the sect's inner court. The contest thus began. Thud, 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 thud. The earth shook under a human stampede as the millions of prospective disciples crammed the 9 passes to force their way toward the inner court. Alas, they'd not even taken 3 steps that 90% collapsed on the spot. Originally, the stampede gathered around 270 million, with 30 million charging each pass. But the trial had barely begun that only 7 million remained. Such an alarming sight startled the onlooking deities who couldn't understand the root of this outcome. It's not testing physique, bloodline, talents, cultivation, or wisdom. It only tests the will, Rithi realized in awe, and by the time the third wave collapsed, many other gods had reached the same conclusion. Talents and trash alike collapsed in shocking numbers, with only those of startling determination moving onward. But while some struggled to make their way up, a scant few were literally breezing through the passes. Without a shred of doubt, those possessed unbreakable Tao hearts. But before such a trial, many deities scoffed. Utter foolishness. Although a recruitment based on the heart rather than innate abilities seems optimal, without talent to back it up, what purpose does unbreakable will serve? Among those most likely to succeed, less than 1% show potential for godhood. What can you possibly do with that? Kabura scoffed, and this time, Pandu didn't disagree. This trial was idealistic foolishness. Although a solid Tao heart was of critical importance on the cultivation road, that alone would never make a god. That Rudra was crippling himself, or so they thought. As far as Conrad was concerned, the Devil Road's strongest foundation was the heart. Did talent make it easier? Undoubtedly. But talent, he could change. As for the Tao heart, he could easily ruin or control it, but bettering it was a tedious task that required too much investment. On a large scale, that wasn't viable. At least not until he broke through to the Prime Devil realm. Those that successfully crossed the passes were destined to become sharp blades in his hands. Chapter 513 Merge and Execution Demands. As the prospective disciples crossed the mountain passes, from the initial 270 million, only roughly 300,000 persisted. And even among them, many were doomed to collapse. But collapsing didn't mean defeat. Those who could challenge the shackles of their hearts and rise through the trial still held a shot at success. Naturally, if achieving that was simple, they wouldn't have fallen, to begin with. Still, many managed to power through. And even as the formation's pressure on their Tao hearts increased, all persisted. Those 300,000 were indeed all endowed with tremendous willpower and the determination to charge at 10,000 legions. But in many, imperfections lingered. The first wave to reach the inner court comprised around 430 cultivators from star-fusing saints to minor gods, forming a heterogeneous pool of talents and cultivation donkeys. But as soon as they crossed the formation to land in the inner court, though awestruck by the idyllic land that put even the heaven-warding temple to shame, they first fell in the same ritual. In tandem, they dropped on their knees, kowtowed toward Conrad, and proclaimed, "Master, your disciple greets you." Although they knew they'd most certainly not become Conrad's direct disciple, since they now belonged to the sect, this ritual was a must. But as they kowtowed, unbeknown to them, devil energies accumulated on the passes erupted in their souls to make utter devotion to Conrad's will their primary objectives. You may rise. Henceforth, you belong to my myriad dreams valley. Its honor and glory relies on your every deed. Conrad replied with a hand wave that lifted the kneeling disciples from the ground and sent them to the side. The second wave soon followed with 1701 disciples and received the same treatment. Those two waves were destined to become Thonian lords and bolster the secret force's might. A third, fourth, fifth wave followed and so on until the 11th and final wave finally reached the court. Of the original 270 million attendants, only 84,000 succeeded in completing the trial. The rest lay on various parts of the immeasurably long passes. 3 hours passed in a flash, and the formation automatically teleported the failed beyond the second mountain. And they soon regained their consciousness. Seeing so many of them ejected by the mountain, some couldn't contain their indignation. In the end, what were those passes testing? Why did I feel my chest suddenly weigh a mountain? I may not have been able to join a mighty sect due to my poor background, but my comprehension abilities have always been astonishing. Why could they pass while I couldn't? Confusion and indignation spread within the failed contestants, and at that time, a voice echoed in all ears. Valley Lord, although on the cultivation road, the Tao heart is of critical importance. Basing your entire examination on that criteria seems a bit improper. Pandu sighed, awakening both the failed and successful disciples to the content of their examination. Although many could already guess it, when reality hit, they couldn't accept it. This is utter nonsense. Even if my Tao heart possesses some flaws, with my talent, as long as I receive key training, the sky is the limit. How can you ignore innate talent when conducting an examination? A failed disciple with outstanding physiques and comprehension abilities snarled in outrage. Outrage that his peers soon echoed. Background you can ignore, the heart you can emphasize, but if you refuse to assess all the rest, how can you cultivate true experts? Valley Lord, are you founding a sect or a horde of pig-headed mongrels? Kabura scoffed, further triggering the rejected. Right, right, right. They roared in tandem while screaming their dissatisfaction in waves of criticism that lost themselves in the clatter of their thundering voices. As they witnessed this scene, even the Sea Dream Temple's new disciples, deacons, and protectors nodded in approval. Controlled by Conrad, the elders followed the trend. Only Rithi shook her head. Did you first ask him what he cultivates? She inwardly scoffed. But at that time, Pandu stood up, and from within the Sea Dream Temple's guest hall, stared directly at Conrad. Lord Duksha didn't survive his wound, leaving the Sea Dream Temple in Lady Rithi's hands. But instead of focusing on managing it, she dallied with a new disciple, broke rules to promote him, and put the entire sect at his disposal. If things carry on in this manner, the Sea Dream Temple is doomed to destruction. And Rudra will be its cause. Pandu exclaimed while aiming his index at Conrad, and the words sent the entire gathering into an uproar. Duksha perished? How could this be? Some wondered with skepticism. How could it not be? The Thonian Primogen's world ending might put even the Overlord and the Warden in critical condition. Of the 7 divine lords, all perished while among the Cardinal Lord, Brihaspati, the strongest, didn't survive. Riddled with wounds inflicted by such a character, why could Duksha not perish? I wouldn't be surprised if tomorrow, news of Durga's death spread within the celestial world. Many immediately rationalized. In the following week since her announcement of her father's demise to the elders and protectors, Rithi wasn't surprised to see rumors on the topic spread like wildfire. Clearly, it was Kama's doing. But with so many elders and protectors as potential culprits, pointing fingers at him was challenging. And seeing the crowd fall to the intended effect, both Pandu and Kama sneered. As in-laws, my primal son's sect stands humiliated by Rithi's scandalous deeds. Initially, my father planned to wash this humiliation in blades and blood. However, My uncle, Kama's heart is grand and forgiving. Because of his pleading, my father shall not exterminate the Sea Dream Temple. Pandu pursued, alarming all the Sea Dream Temple's disciples, new and old, with the threat of extermination. If in life Daksha wasn't Surya's match in death, the situation was undoubtedly worse. Although the Sea Dream Temple's fighting power beneath the legendary god rank skyrocketed, without a primogen to hold the fort, how could they resist the sun god's wrath? Inwardly, they thanked heavens that Kama didn't forget past affection. Still, not drawing arms is one thing. Accepting these circumstances, another. Today, your Sea Dream Temple only has one choice. Surrender Rudra's life, and become a branch of our primal sun sect with my uncle as the branch leader. We hope that from now on, Rithi can behave like a proper wife, and stop dragging her husband's name through the mud. This is also your only way to redress the impending disasters awaiting you. Refuse, and the primal sun sect must avenge itself by marshalling its celestial hosts. Chapter 514 Death. When Pandu's dreadful words thundered, regardless of their respective ranks, fright surged within the Sea Dream Temple's disciples' hearts. They may not fear the primal sun sect, but they did fear Surya. Once a battle broke out, they didn't stand a chance. Deacons and protectors all looked to Rithi, pleading her with their eyes. However, the goddess remained silent, with her eyes shut close as she sat on her temple lord's seat. Acting temple lord, sacrificing one Rudra for the Sea Dream Temple's survival is undoubtedly a wise move. Please don't hesitate. One of the new protectors exclaimed with a low bow. Rithi ignored him. Acting temple lord, at the end of the day, it is your lack of judgment that gave the primal sun sect the opportunity to strike and cause this tragedy. What's so wrong about becoming their branch? With Lord Kama's forgiving heart, he will surely not make things difficult for you. Acting temple lord, the situation nears a catastrophe. Please no longer hesitate. The new protectors said one after the other. Those were recent recruits with no blood or history tie to the Sea Dream Temple. They joined because they yearned for a better future. None wished to perish before enjoying the fruits of their new position. And as the succession of supplications carried on, Rithi shook her head. On the outside, death-fearing Sea Dream Temple disciples gathered en masse to request Conrad's handover and the Sea Dream Temple's capitulation. Acting Temple Lord, we are in the wrong. Acting Temple Lord, please make a fair judgment. Acting Temple Lord. And so it went on. Seeing this, Pandu flashed a victorious grin while Kama inwardly sneered. Ultimately, the world belonged to might. Even if Rithi wished to protect her new lover, before the primal sun sect, before Surya's might, she could only capitulate. Soon, he would wash this humiliation in that Rudra's blood. But never did they expect that as the majority of the sect disciples requested his head, Conrad's lips would curl into a wolfish grin. See? This is why my myriad dreams valley only tests the heart. The battle has yet to start that they grovel and request surrender. They shiver like frightened children and seek the simplest road to salvation. With that kind of mindset, with that kind of will, what can you build? All wastes. Conrad scoffed, targeting not only the primal sun sect's disciples, but the rejected contestants who now found delight in the myriad dreams valley's misfortune. Propelled by formless force, his words echoed in the minds of all gathered. But while some felt their cheeks redden, others disagreed. A pity that before absolute might, willpower is inconsequential. No matter how hard your bones may be, we shall still make you bend. Pandu retorted with a condescending sneer. With a half-step legendary god cultivation and the backing of his father, there was not a single deity on the scene able to deter him. Meanwhile, Kabura and other neutral deities anticipated the new sect's collapse with bright smiling faces. Kabura, in particular, welcomed the scene with delight. Having lost both his mother and sister in a matter of days, he now faced the world with a rancid mood, and inwardly wished all could suffer alongside him. That Rudra's tragedy was undoubtedly a treat to his eyes. Well said. Before absolute might, willpower is inconsequential. But in what world is your might, absolute? Conrad chortled and stretched out his right hand. Instantly, the mountain gleamed in dazzling white light that blinded all on the scene. You've been rejected, but instead of making a graceful departure and striving for a future comeback, you dare quibble? Death! Conrad exclaimed and clenched his fist. From the celestial mountain, 8 blinding spears emerged and shot toward the nearly 270 million of rejected contestants. Before they could make a move, the 8 spears beheaded them all, destroying them in body and soul, while unleashing rivers of blood at the mountain's bottom. Each high of 100, the 7 spears soared into the sky, hovering above the myriad dreams valley and deterring all sides. An 8-star god formation? Kabura realized in fright. At the same level, formations surpassed all the rest. Unlike artifacts, so long as enough resources were provided, formations would always unleash their full might. Moreover, with a skilled formation master, the combination of runes, laws, and resources would ensure the formation could unleash a might leagues above artifacts and cultivators of the same level. This 8-star god formation surpassed the strength of a legendary god's all-out strike. In the past, heaven only had 4 8-star formation gods, all primogens. Where did such a formation emerge from? As disciples, like leeches, you yearn to drain the sect to the marrow, but in the face of adversity, you do not hesitate to abandon peers and dignity to surrender to the oppressor. Death! Conrad sentenced, and echoing his order, the blinding spears aimed at the disciples beseeching Rthi for surrender, and released legions of white rays that skewered them all, burning them to ashes and dust. Knowing that they were next on the extermination list, Kabura and the other deities rose in outrage. Rudra, you're going too far. I'm the Divine Earth Temple's new lord, the ruler of all yakshas across the Divine Earth domain. Do you dare take my life? Kabura bellowed. But while he took the haughty stance of a monarch, other deities with weaker background chose the proper way out and ran for their lives. Alas, no way out existed for them. What a joke! In this world, the only thing I dare not do is nothing. The host suffers insults and his guests. You choose to stand idle. I can forgive that. But you have the nerves to either engineer or yearn for my mishaps? Death! The 8 spears merged into one and swept the air in a downward cleave, drawing a white half-moon that flew toward the runaway deities, slashing them all in 2 perfect halves. But long before their corpses tumbled, the half-moon broke into a radiant arrow rain that threatened to make porcupines out of Kabura, Pandu, and the Ravmalak elders by his side. From the Sea Dream Temple's Elder Hall, Kama rose, ready to use the ring to suppress the attack and fight alongside his nephew. In a meteor of golden flames, he soared into the sky, landing before the arrow rain. Without delay, Pandu followed, standing beside Kama, and the two released the might of the 8-star god artifacts they'd received from Surya to meet Conrad's assault. From the White Ring, mighty truth laws emerged to dispel the arrow rain, while from the golden chakram in Pandu's hands, searing golden flames erupted to tackle the spears and ruin the mountain. All to no avail. From the blinding spear, truth laws that far surpassed that of anything Kama's ring could provide suppressed his move. Turning into a light meteor, the spear streaked across the air to tear Pandu into shreds. His bits and pieces burned to ashes. Now, only the dumbstruck Kama remained, and as he stared at Conrad from afar, none of the previous elation remained. Flabbergasted, he quivered in fright. Chapter 5:15 Exterminating the Primal Sun section. In less than 1 minute, the public outrage and battle stance taken against the Myriad Dreams Valley resulted in a bloody carnage from which even sect leaders and prominent elders couldn't escape. With a single formation, the Valley Lord suppressed all sides, refusing to spare even that only showed veiled antagonism. What was overbearingness? This was overbearingness. At first, Kama truly couldn't comprehend where that boldness came from. But when the level of truth laws registered within his mind, he no longer had any doubts. No wonders. No wonders the ring couldn't expose him. He must have long reached truth embodiment. Kama realized, far too late. However, he never connected Rudra to the Thonian primogen, thinking that he must have lucked out and obtained some high-level truth inheritance. But in that instant, it mattered not. His cultivation is definitely not as simple as an early-stage cosmic god. With such truth laws, what can't he fake? If Rathi's breakthrough indeed stems from him, then he should at least be a legendary god. I can't spend another second here. Kama reasoned, and turned into a ball of golden flames to bolt from the scene. But instead of running away from the mountain range altogether, he dived toward the hall where Rathi currently lay. What a passionate man! Although he stood no chance to escape, he should at least give it a proper shot. What would seeking Rathi do besides ensuring his captivity? The Valkyrie scoffed at Conrad's left, but at the right, Verena shook her head in disapproval. It might not be that simple. You said it yourself, he cannot escape. You know it, and so does he? That being the case, of course, he'll try to find himself the most reliable shield. Who knows, if Rathi pities him, she might even activate the temple's defense formations to buy him time. Verena reasoned. Of course, none believed that such an outcome could occur. But as Conrad stared into the hall, his eyes contorted into a frown. Oh, interesting. Within the main sect hall, the guiltless protectors stared in awe as Kama barged in, hurtling through the hall to land before Rathi's stairs. Rathi, there is no time to waste. You must come with me. Together, we can start over. Kama exclaimed while crossing the stairs to reach Rathi. The clearly written urgency on his face needed no explanation. However, Rathi included, none expected him to speak such words. It was as if he completely forgot all that just occurred, and the bridges now standing between them due to Conrad. Are you muddled? With everything that has transpired, you still yearn to stay by my side? Even if you don't mind me making a cuckold out of you, shouldn't I mind you plotting against my maimed father? Rathi asked with a derisive smirk as she remained seated in her temple lord throne. All along, she kept her eyes shut close, never glancing toward Kama. But as he possessed by the devil, the fool ignored all the signs to stride toward her. Rathi, my love, I know that you aren't guilty. It must be that vile creature's fault. He's the one sowing discord between us. If not for his foul tricks, you couldn't betray me. Since I forgive you, why can't you look past my moment of misconduct? For the sake of our past, please, come with me. Kama urged while stretching his hands toward Rathi. But as they neared hers, her eyes opened wide, releasing a terrible pressure that made even Surya look like a good-for-nothing junior. Impudence! How dare you stretch your hands toward my eminent self? Rathi asked in a relaxed but bone-chilling tone that forced Kama back. Every word seemed laced in a transcendental force that oppressed every fiber of Kama's being. Unable to resist, he dropped on his knees, quivering like a paltry feather before an unrelenting storm. Now, as he stared at Rathi's sitting form, Kama's eyes widened in fright. You are not our... Kama could never finish his words. As his lips stammered, a boundless force locked him from all sides, fried his brain, and made him burst into 10,000 light particles, leaving neither flesh nor soul behind. Undisturbed, Rathi closed her eyes. Meanwhile, as a grand cleanup swept the Sea Dream Temple, the Primal Sun sect received the visit of unexpected guests, or more accurately, a shadow visit. Conrad and Celine stood above the Primal Sun sect's headquarters, looking down on all the lives lying within. Chandra is a pig, Malcolm a eunuch, and Mahava a corpse. Now, of your enemies, a few underlings aside, only Surya remains. How about I trade his head in exchange for your cunt? Conrad, whose true body had long since left the Myriad Dreams Valley alongside Celine to monitor Surya, asked with a devious grin. This kind of crass talk you can only use with me, but I like it. Celine replied with a wolfish grin. That is natural. You are, after all, the bimbo imp I personally raised for more than 2 centuries. Conrad chortled, and in tandem. The two dropped from the sky and bypassed all walls and defenses to land in Surya's cultivation abode. There, the sun god sat with a golden lotus hovering above his head. His 4 remaining sect elders stood in opposed corners of the room, injecting unending waves of god force into the lotus. Surya always had a plan B, and when that failed, a C. Although he hoped he could complete the lotus's maturation with the Sea Dream Temple's Dreamstone, Godjade was still an issue he could only fix with the sacrifice of his elders. With his truth wielding, he took control of them, forcing them to dump the entirety of their energies into the lotus and to not stop until they perished. Without hesitation, they carried out the order, dumping the entirety of their godly force into the golden lotus whose sun-like radiance heightened with every jet. When the last drop of god force readied to leave their bodies, the 4 burned their blood, making a last-ditch effort to dump even more fuel into the lotus. Soon, they collapsed. But as their bodies tumbled onto the ground, the lotus radiance reached its acme. Golden flames erupted from its core, stretching toward its petal and turning it into a golden flame lotus. Seeing this, Surya could barely contain his elation. The primal sun lotus is mature. Now, as long as I can lay hands on that dream stone, the result can rise 100-fold. To say nothing of the peak of the legendary god rank, becoming an overgod is within sight. Surya exclaimed, and to grant his prayers, Conrad stretched out his right hand, causing the dream stone to appear and merge with the primal sun lotus. An explosion of magenta and golden flames swept the room, sending the unprepared Surya flying against a nearby wall as the primal sun lotus successfully went from 8-star to 9-star god medicine. Conrad beckoned, and as Surya regained his composure, he was startled to see his lotus, the result of millions of years of work, fly away from him and stop near his secluded room's entrance. The devil concealment vanished, and to Surya's stupor, the Chthonian Primogen appeared, very much alive, with his lotus now hovering above his hand. Instantly, Surya's eyes widened in fright. Chapter 516 Regret My Ass. Part 1. As expected, you weren't dead. How could you be? But Chthonian Primogen, with your cultivation, status, and strength, do you really have a need to oppress me and snatch my resources? Surya inquired without referring to himself as this eminence, that alone showed deference and his intent to find a common ground. Alas, awed by Conrad's presence, his eyes never glanced toward Celine. If they did, perhaps he wouldn't be using that tone. Amused by the words, Conrad's lips curled into a smile. Indeed, you are the cleverest deity of the celestial realm. Though you know I come with ill intent, you still manage to maintain your cool and first seek a diplomatic way out. In your stead, others would either quiver in fright, break into a desperate flight, or swear to fight me to the last. Impressed? I am impressed. Conrad began while the primal sun lotus rotated within his palm, and feeling the genuineness of the words, Surya believed there was room for compromise. Conrad's follow-up broke his expectations. What a pity that you offended my longtime partner. Otherwise, with your brain, I would have put your talent to good use. Conrad sighed while his gaze remained fixed on the primal sun lotus. Although it couldn't compare to the heaven-swallowing pill he planned to refine as a 9-star god medicine, it was indeed a marvelous product. The primal sun lotus possessed 30 petals, each containing substantial over-god-level energy. Although it was but of the early stage, one petal was enough to make an early-stage legendary god directly reach the late stage. With 10 petals, an early-stage legendary god could reach the peak, and with the whole lotus, becoming a false overgod was a must. For someone such as Surya who only stood a step away from the peak of the legendary god rank, as long as he fully digested the lotus medicinal power, he was destined to become an overgod. Besides good luck, one could only imagine how many millions of years of ardent effort nurturing this lotus took. What a pity that Surya would never get to enjoy its fruits. Raising his right hand, Conrad covered the lotus with his palm, releasing a formless, ever-expanding force whose mere presence filled Surya with incomparable dread. The power of infiniteness. Though he didn't know what the Thonian Primogen had in mind, Surya didn't doubt he wouldn't ruin the lotus. If he wanted to, he wouldn't infuse it with the dream stone. Perhaps he still had a way to magnify the results. Not dwelling on matters he couldn't solve, Surya shifted his head toward Celine. That woman clearly was the longtime partner he offended. Otherwise, she wouldn't be the one standing beside the Thonian Primogen at this precise moment. At first, Surya couldn't imagine how he had possibly offended such an existence. But as his eyes locked on Celine's form, though at first startled by the mammoth breasts that could at least fit an F-cup, as an experienced deity, Surya's attention quickly returned to Celine's eyes, golden eyes in which he felt an uncanny familiarity. Isilia? No, little brat? Surya muttered, first confusing Celine for her mother before finally recalling that defiant gaze of hers. But in the little brat, Celine felt no warmth. That was the nickname Surya always used before starting his experiments. 13 years of brutal, relentless experiments. In her more than 1 million years of existence, Celine always felt that those 13 years occupied the longest time. But as she met Surya's gaze, her lips curved into a smile. "Greetings, uncle. Long time no see. Missed me?" Celine inquired with a mischievous grin. But as the confirmation echoed, Surya's eyes narrowed in confusion. "Impossible. I destroyed Celine in body and soul. 1 million years ago, there was no Thonian Primogen. How could she possibly survive? This joke isn't funny." Surya reasoned, thinking this a result of Conrad's probing of his past. But when Celine's following words echoed, he couldn't help but accept that reality. For a truth-wielding expert to not even be able to distinguish illusion from reality is indeed laughable. "Uncle, in this world, there are too many forces that you do not understand. Trying to access the truth with your limited vision and understanding is simply ludicrous." Celine countered, and the uncle in her mouth was laced in such a venomous tone that Surya couldn't help but believe his eyes. At that time, as if to emphasize her words, Conrad waved his right hand, and beside the primal sun lotus, 12 identical lotuses appeared, all rippling with the same energies. Seeing this, Surya's eyes widened in fright. "Impossible. How can you possibly create identical replicas of a 9-star god medicines? Even the fabled truth embodiment cannot accomplish this." Surya exclaimed as if protesting against Conrad's reason-defying abilities. If anyone could just casually reproduce that lotus, why did he spend millions of years cultivating it? Little did he know that while at the moment, Conrad couldn't produce more than 12 copies, when his infiniteness insight progressed further, that hard cap would collapse. "I am the Thonian realm's god sovereign. Who are you? What are you? What gives you the right to estimate my abilities? Don't humiliate yourself." Conrad retorted while the 13 lotuses formed a ring around him. Unable to refute the words, Surya chortled in a self-deprecating laugh while shaking his head from left to right. "Indeed, I do not have those qualifications. Never did I expect that I would devote so many eons of my life to this project, only to have it fall into the hands of others. Powerlessness is indeed a curse." Following this admittance of defeat, Surya shifted his eyes back onto Celine. "You found yourself quite the reliable backer. I suppose you are here for revenge? Fine, I am not his match. Do what you will. I only hope that for the sake of our common ancestry, you leave the primal sun sect a way out." Surya requested while bending his back in a low bow. Having never expected him to concede so easily, Celine frowned. But at that time, Conrad lifted his right index, causing one of the lotuses to rise and fly toward Celine's chest. Following the refining of his Grand Devil pills, her cultivation had gone from mid-stage Boundless Sea Devil to early-stage Grand Devil, and already approached the mid-stage. Devil pills didn't merely contain energy, but also gathered the imprinted mysteries of the road. Now, as Celine refined the primal sun lotus through Conrad's help, her cultivation directly rose from early stage to peak stage Grand Devil. If not for her lacking understanding of the Devil Road, she would have directly broken through to the prime devil realm. Still, in cultivation alone, she was now no different from a mid-stage legendary god. Of course, the unrivaled might of the Devil Road, the Law Revolution creed, and her own bloodline strength ensured she could now fight over gods. Surya, however, couldn't see that point. Sun God, I have always been a fair man. If you want a way out for your sect, you have to fight for it. Defeat her, and only you die. Lose, and your entire sect follows you to the grave. Conrad proclaimed, causing Surya to not know whether to laugh or cry. In what world did such a ridiculous proposal count as fair? But having never been one of those naive gods believing in celestial justice, he didn't dare hope for more. Fine. Then, little brat, today, for the sake of old times, Uncle must give you a memorable thrashing. Surya declared with soaring determination. Chapter 517 Regret My Ass. Part 2. As Surya accepted the challenge, Celine's massive breakthrough stabilized, and to prevent loss of energy, her devil heart stored what remained for future use. Her eyes opened wide, rippling with a dreadful battle intent aimed solely at Surya. I've always admired those that face death with a smile. But uncle, just like you've taught me, there are things 10,000 times worse than death. Celine began, but ignoring the words, Surya summoned an 8-star god artifact, a marble-white disciplinary rod Celine could effortlessly recognize. That rod was her grandfather, Sakra's favorite artifact. Later, Surya would make it his disciplinary instrument. For him to use it out of all the artifacts at his disposal, Surya clearly wished to upset and destroy her composure. Shameless, Celine scoffed and stretched out her right hand, causing an explosion of demonic and celestial energies to burst from her form. Ancestral glory, infernal luminaries. 9 crimson suns appeared at her back, each rippling with the perfect combination of celestial and infernal forces. Ravmalak and archdemon energies overlapped in a brand new, several times mightier force, while devil force unfurled, merging with the 9 crimson suns to fill the area with crushing might. Instantly, Surya staggered and released the full might of his cultivation base to resist the pressure of the crimson suns. And as he activated his own ancestral glory, 9 golden suns appeared at his back, releasing a searing force that contended with Celine's ancestral glory. But that merely was the beginning. In Celine's right hand, a glaive with a jet-black handle and crimson blade appeared, increasing her Nephilim force 100-fold. This was her lineage weapon, Fell Judgment. Grasping its handle, Celine activated the Law Revolution Creed, summoning the might of all base, higher, and primal laws in a single blow. Besides her truth embodiment, thanks to her profound cultivation of the Law Revolution, all other laws came at wielding level. Whirling her glaive with her 2 hands, Celine fell into a battle stance, with her weight resting on her right foot while the left faced Surya. With a glance, Surya knew she planned to release her all in a single strike. And knowing that the fight wouldn't have more than one move, he held the marble-white rod in a battle stance of his. Gold and white flames erupted from his form, turning him into a gold and white fireball. The golden flames represented his sun embodiment, while the white stemmed from his truth laws. Tao Law, solar revelation. Surya howled while massive god force erupted from his artifact. From a fireball, he turned into a gold and white sun that blinded all as he flew towards Celine. The clashing, searing pressure turned the room into an inferno, with the earth crackling and cratering under their 2 feet. If not for Conrad's suppression, that room would have long since collapsed. But as Surya barreled into Celine, he went from 1 to 10,000 solar meteors, each rippling with terrible might. Yet, Celine remained undisturbed. With one deft move, she swept the air in a horizontal slash, releasing a kaleidoscopic half-moon that tore all 10,000 suns into shreds. Boom! In one ringing blast, the solar meteors collapsed, becoming dropping light particles, while Surya's body reappeared and flew backward. Bang! With that one move, Surya crashed in the opposite wall, with a clean, horizontal gash splitting him into two halves. Still, the sun god breathed. But though the blow didn't target his soul, his body was immediately deprived of all fighting power. Unable to resist, Surya tumbled onto the ground, with his open wide in a mind-boggling stupor. How could you possibly have such strength? Your cultivation is just equal to a mid-stage legendary god. Surya stammered, unable to comprehend that dreadful eruption of strength. In that blow, he felt a threat that even the warden couldn't produce, and didn't doubt that if she wanted to, Celine could have ended him with that one blow. The one beside me crushed the overlord and the warden with a cultivation equal to a mid-stage ancestral god. Having inherited his cultivation method and road, if at this level I can't even crush you, shouldn't I kill myself? Celine replied while taking leisurely steps toward the bleeding Surya. Rent by all the energies within her blow, his wounds refused to heal. And knowing that his sect didn't have a future, Surya closed his eyes, suppressing the sorrow welling up within his chest. At that time, Celine stopped before him, and as she lowered her gaze to his maimed form, her eyes reflected her loathing. Though I don't personally care, grandfather once wanted me to ask you if you ever regretted. Celine stated in a blank tone, while tilting her head to the right. The words aimed at a precise event, and hearing them, Surya recalled some unpleasant events, times beside his father, times he'd rather forget. Alas, he couldn't. But soon, those waves of indignation made way for another realization, and his disbelief returned. The old man is alive? Surya asked in a stupor, and amused by his reaction, Celine nodded in approval. Indeed, he now calls himself the happiness god. According to my estimations, he should now be breaking through to the over-god rank. If he hasn't already, it can happen anytime. Celine directly replied, causing Surya's upper half to tremble under a surge of violent inner waves. Over-god? Happiness god? That indeed sounds like him. The old fool hasn't changed. Surya chortled, but in the following second, his face twisted in a horrifying grimace of rage and hatred. Regret? Regret my ass. Surya snarled while smashing his trembling fist onto the ground. You all blame me, blame Surya for being cold-hearted, sparing neither friend nor kin in his pursuit of power. However, did you ever ask yourselves that if not for your stupidity, those events could never unfurl? Carried by his long-suppressed frustration, Surya's words thundered within the room as veins beat and stretched across his reddened face. I am one of the oldest deities of the celestial realm. Some of the younger primogens must see me as an elder. I have cultivated since the dawn of times, but due to my lacking bloodline, I couldn't reach the legendary god rank. However, I never resented that. The world is unkind, fairness a pipe stream. Those who wallow in such concepts are nothing but delusional fools. We might as well strive for self-improvement. So I strove. The old fool never wanted to sully his hands, believing that he could run our house with his aloof stance and beauties. It was I who convinced the first human males that joined Father's banner and received his blessings to give up their ancestry for Deva blood. I, who knowing heaven's situation chaotic, advised and endeavored for the creation of the primal sun sect. I who toiled days and nights to cement our position in the celestial realm. I. Meanwhile, when he wasn't cultivating and seeking opportunities, he brought new beauties home and sired bastards left and right. The son does all the work, and the father enjoys all the glory. But I didn't resent that, because such is heaven's will. The trembling Surya roared, and as he spoke, tears filled his eyes. Chapter 5:18 Destroy It All. My good father only had one thing to do, remain mighty. And true, he excelled in that area. Truth inheritance, peak stage legendary god. The warden aside, who dared challenge him? I initially thought that all those sacrifices were worth it. How could I expect that when the entirety of heaven and hell, led by the Overlord and the Warden, crusade against the third god of war, that old imbecile would be so muddled as to stand idle? Worse, he was ready to alert the human realm and foil the plan. In that era, who was so crazed as to make enemies of both the Overlord and the Warden? If that bastard got his way, throughout the three realms, who could save us? Having no other choice, I could only collude with some traitorous elders of the Titan domain, have them kidnap and murder my only daughter to trigger his revenge. Only in that way did we manage to avoid calamity. And now he has the gals to ask me if I regret? The nerve. Surya spat with his bloodshot eyes red from rage. Later, when he figured out the plot, he even had the gals to chastise me. What a joke. The world asks me why I betrayed him. Why don't they ask him why he betrayed me? In this life, my only regret is to have endured his idiocy for so long. A new primogen appears. What does he do? Nothing. Your muddled idiot of a mother falls for an archdemon? What does he do? Nothing. The bitch gets pregnant. What does he do? He supports them. They give birth to bastard twins. What does he do? He defends them, having the nerve to set up a truth formation to cheat heaven's will. Regret? Joke. If I didn't stand to defend my house, you damnable imbeciles would have driven it into extinction. Under my leadership, talents overflowed, deities succeeded one another, and none dared disrespect us. If not for me bumping against the Thonian primogen, within 10,000 years, I could make the primal sun sect become heaven's undisputed #1. Why should I regret? Allow me to be blunt. You are imbeciles. Imbeciles deserve to die. Imbeciles deserve to be trampled. Imbeciles have no right to exist within the cultivation world. As his words thundered, Surya's breath rasped in his throat. But if he expected his words to trigger anything in Celine, disappointment was his lot. Not only didn't she flounder, but her smile grew more sinister. Right. I totally agree. The cultivation world doesn't tolerate compassion. Only the most sinister of hearts thrive in our worlds. So, uncle, allow me to be sinister. Celine retorted and raised her hand, causing a dark purple miasma to emerge from her palm and sneak into Surya's pores. Instantly, his wounds vanished, but as he returned to peak condition, he felt the billowing negativity within his heart erupt alongside his hidden demons. In that instant, his heart demons corroded his Tao heart, allowing Celine to take control of it, and she did. Too eager to break through and become an overgod, the sun god suffered cultivation deviation, was demonized and destroyed the primal sun sect before immolating himself. Now that is a story for the ages. Celine chortled, a callous, demonic laugh that filled Surya with pure dread. No, no, I beg you knew. He roared, alas, his pleading fell on deaf ears. Celine waved her hand, and all of Surya's roars died in his throat. Though his bloodshot eyes showed his internal struggle, he couldn't resist her orders. This was done on purpose, enabling him to experience it all. Surya, I don't give a fuck about your plight. I only know that I have one father, one mother, and one brother. You ruined them all. My father and mother, I can bring back in the future. But thanks to you, my brother went mad with hatred and is twisted beyond redemption. God only knows where he is and what he plans. The bill you owe me is large, too large for me to settle with just your head. Also, I was never a reasonable bitch to begin with. Celine chortled while giving Surya's right shoulder a few pats. Though he desperately wished to resist the urge, as if possessed by his inner demons, Surya broke out of his secluded chambers and leaped into a macabre dance, butchering all disciples, deacons, protectors, and elders that remained within the sect. The closer he was to destroying the work of a lifetime, the more despair his heart sank into. But no matter how shredded and torn he felt, he couldn't stop. Father, no. One of Surya's sons stammered as Surya gouged out his heart. The scant few remaining elders rose to oppose him but were slaughtered in an instant. In desperation, The protectors attempted to trigger the defensive formations, but long before they could, Surya beheaded them all. Your Eminence, I beg you. Death? Uncle, please spare me. Death? Brother, what is wrong with you? Death, death, death. Wherever Surya went, the bloody whirlwind of death followed, sparing no one regardless of age or background. And as his macabre dance came to an end, Surya ironically broke through to the peak of the legendary god rank. But as his eyes swept the scene, swallowing this work of collapsed monuments, blood, and gore, Surya felt the world around him spun, and his heart rate rising to impossible heights. Ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha. My sect. Ha ha ha. My house. Ha 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 ha. My life. Arg. Surya snapped, roaring against the world in a maddened frenzy, while clutching his head in desperation. Quivering, he dropped on his knees, and with tears filling his bloodshot eyes, raised one last look toward the vast, celestial sky. My heaven. Boom. Surya could never finish his words. His heart ruptured, and in a massive explosion of godly flames, he immolated himself, burning until only his legendary god bones remained. The flames pierced heaven's sky, alerting all throughout the celestial world of the primal sun sect's calamity. Before the flame pillar took shape, Conrad turned heels and, alongside Celine, vanished from sight. Now, from above, the two stared at the primal sun sect's ruins. Conrad stretched out his hands, draining and devouring the boundless energies of dread, hatred, grief, and ruin billowing from the desolated land. Again, he didn't directly refine it, but stored it instead for his incoming seclusion. Not bad. I give you an A-. Conrad appraised with a serious, not-so-serious nod. Chapter 519 Steamy Note Part 1. Petty, could it be that you liked him? Celine jested as the two stared at Surya's remaining god bones. The words pulled a faint smile from Conrad. What can I say? Talents are becoming a rarity. As a monarch, seeing one fall so soon does unsettle my heart. Conrad replied while holding his heart with a theatrical head spin. Loads of nonsense. The Jade Dynasty teams with talents selected from all corners of an entire realm. What more do you need? Celine rolled her eyes. How could she not see that Conrad was once more trying to cheat her? Touché. Bold, sharp, and resolute. Though I do not lack Surya's, I did fancy his abilities and feel like there isn't much difference between us. If my strength wasn't that much higher than his, we could have had an interesting competition. Adelar said it better. Scheming is the method of the weak. We scheme because we are feeble. When strength reaches a certain level, all plots become meaningless. As we step increasingly closer to the end, I somehow regret those days where wit was my sharpest tool, and my opponents as many as swarming ants on a summer night. Conrad declared while his hands rested on either side of his hips. But hearing those words, Celine shook her head. There is nothing wrong with not having to rely on plots. I believe Surya's fondest dream was to possess the absolute strength that would make all his scheming unnecessary. Also, I disagree with one thing. The core similarity between the likes of you and I is that we separate the world into two categories, those we care about and the rest. The first category we don't harm, the second is fair game. He was different. When the clutter of ambitions and aspirations replaces the heart, are we threading the road? Or are we its puppets? Heartlessness is the slothful road to might. Therefore, I despise him. Satisfied by Celine's reply, Conrad nodded in approval and turned toward her. Well said, beautiful. You must have had an extraordinary instructor. Knowing who the instructor referred to, Celine spun to face Conrad and bowed with clasped hands, unwittingly giving a direct view to her massive cleavage. Only the best. The words echoed with a playful tinge that didn't escape Conrad. His lips curved into a smirk, and without warning, he yanked Celine by her left arm, and as she lurched onto him, Conrad seized her waist. Spawning officials and riveting beauties have always been the bane of great dynasties. Celine, by reaching the top in both areas, are you trying to ruin the state? Conrad bantered with a wolfish grin, and as if wronged by the words, Celine pouted, furrowing her brows while pressing her massive rack against Conrad's chest. Your Majesty, all I owe to your careful nurturing. Even if I must ruin the state, don't I first need your approval? As she spoke, Celine batted her eyelashes with suggestive glances and pressed her chest harder against Conrad's. His grasp around her waist tightened while the gleam of desire shone in his eyes. From beneath his pants, Celine could feel Conrad's rod harden, rising against the fabric to press her thigh. Good that you know. The trial period is over. It's high time you officially join the household, Conrad declared, and without further ado, took Celine's lips into his for an impromptu, slurpy smooch. Meanwhile, alarmed by Surius' last flame pillar, low-level deities from the primal sun domain rushed toward the sect's ruins and were startled to see their holy land ruined beyond recognition. Hundreds of thousands of corpses littered the desolate ground as the lingering cry of wronged souls permeated the atmosphere. And in the middle of all this carnage, the sun god's skeleton remained. None could comprehend the source of this calamity, and dumbfounded, those minor deities stared helplessly at one another. But this was merely the beginning. Soon, the heaven-warding temple dispatched a team of Brahma gods that arrived to determine the truth of the events. After combining their eye of illumination with seer's vision, those Brahma gods came to the same result. In his haste to break through to the next level, the sun god suffered cultivation deviation, was demonized, and turned against his sect, slaughtering all without exception before immolating himself. The Brahma gods declared and waved their hands, weaving a truth projection that showcased the events following Surius' deviation. At first, none could believe that after billions of years of cultivation, the mighty sun god would suddenly go astray, break through on the sect's sacrifice, and finally immolate himself. Such a tragic tale had never occurred in the celestial world. Alas, the images spoke louder than all speculation, certifying the truth of the events. What a tragedy! Who could expect that after billions of years of radiant rule, the primal sun sect would end in such a wretched manner? Under His Eminence's leadership, the primal sun domain incessantly thrived, leaving the others far behind. Now, without the primal sun sect to protect us, we stand at the mercy of the other domains. Who knows? Perhaps those other divine and cardinal sects will soon come to split both the domain and goods. Not necessarily. There is no active primogen left in heaven. As long as Lord Pandu's group returns from the Myriad Dreams Valley's inauguration, there is room for maneuver. Some rationalized. Due to the Life Plate Hall having been ruined, none could see those disciples' current state. Alas, from the various sects' headquarters, other news soon followed. Of all the guests dispatched to the Myriad Dreams Valley's inauguration, not one survived. Afterward, the Sea Dream Temple spread the news that under the guise of congratulatory visit, the Primal Sun sect attempted a coup, but though supported by the various guests, was defeated. The clash saw the deaths of all guests alongside legions of promising Sea Dream disciples. This time, the Heaven-Warding Temple didn't care to corroborate the news, for at this point, it mattered not. Of course, even if they wished to, they could only see what Conrad allowed them to. Again, Heaven's power sphere had experienced seismic changes. The divine sects could no longer live up to the name, and of the remaining cardinal sects, only the Sea Dream Temple still stood strong. The Heaven-Warding Temple aside, they could suppress all. With the banner of retribution, the Sea Dream Temple dispatched troops to secure the remains of the Primal Sun sect. With the Warden unable to interfere and Rithi's promotion as legendary goddess, the Heaven-Warding Temple couldn't take a strong stance. Seizing the momentum, the Sea Dream Temple and Myriad Dreams Valley used the alleged guest involvement to annex all divine domains. Their ruling sects quickly capitulated, with Conrad-controlled elders rebelling, and offering both direct access and treasury to the invader. In any case, With the myriad dreams Valley's superior might, they couldn't offer much resistance. In a flash from 13 domains, heaven only contained 4, with the sea dream domain now occupying more than 70% of the celestial realm. Little did the world know that while they'd not officially bowed, the Radiant Light Mountain, whose entire Elder Council had been invaded with devil seeds, also stood within Conrad's control. In the meantime, Conrad led Celine back into his chambers to finish the day on a steamy note. Chapter 520 Steamy Note Part 2. While still locked in their slurpy smooch, Conrad and Celine crossed the void to return to the former's chambers. There, Conrad laid Celine onto the bed, dropping alongside her as her moist lips tugged on his. By the time her back landed on the sheet, Conrad's hands were upon her thighs, stroking them as he went down her silver dress. Grabbing the flounce, Conrad lifted Celine's dress, laying bare her wide hips, sumptuous legs, and moist nether regions. Their kissing intensified, with their tongues dancing in a tantalizing mixture of brutal passion. And while Conrad revealed her bottom, Celine didn't remain idle, slipping her hands into his shirt to stroke his muscular chest. The sounds of their meshing bodies rose against the chamber's walls, but as they kept one another's lips silenced in raw passion, Conrad raised his thigh, gently pressing it against Celine's moist cunt in a slow rubbing. At the same time, Conrad lowered the straps of Celine's dress, exposing her gigantic breasts to full view. Driven by their tangling bodies, the pair of cushy breasts bounced, grappling with Conrad's chest for a gush of fresh air. There, Conrad broke the kiss, letting his tongue escape Celine's to tour her neck and suckle her earlobes. She indulged in his touch, in the tension, the heat and electricity his every caress brought her, even without the use of magic. No, it was magic of its own, a form of delight she was accustomed to see, but never experienced. Her eyes glazed with lust, a frantic desire for the one possessing her body, and surrendering to basic instinct. Celine wrapped her hands around his head, pressing him against her chest after another hickey of his. Ah! Celine moaned, a delightful, soul-gripping moan that would have robbed any man's attention. For that instant, Conrad stopped, listening to the echo of her moan while his eyes rose to lock on hers. There they stood, electrifying one another's body with an exchange of impassioned glances. This time, Celine broke the spell, gliding down the bed to lie right beneath Conrad's crotch. With no need for guidance, she unbuckled his belt, letting his scalding, demanding rod spring free and smack her cheek. Again, though Celine had long been exposed to this woman-subduing weapon, when faced with the real deal, she couldn't help but gulp her saliva in anticipation. Even without words, her body screamed her suppressed need to devour Conrad whole. For too long she'd kept that need shackled, but now she could finally let it erupt in an unrestrained blaze of passion. Didn't you always fancy those massive breasts of mine? Good. Today, I must give you a good service and wring you dry. Celine whispered, emphasizing her every word with languorous spins of her tongue, while her eyes made rounds between Conrad's cock and his icy eyes. As he heard those words, Conrad's lips curled into a wolfish, inviting grin. Alongside Celine he spun, now lounging with his back on the bed, while she lay between his legs. But even as she wrapped her warm breasts around his flaming rod, Celine's eyes never left him. Sticking out her tongue, Celine flicked it across her lips with a sultry, provocative glance that pulled in Conrad's attention. As she pressed her breasts around Conrad's shaft, Celine dripped a large amount of saliva on top of his rod, moistening her cleavage along the way, before stroking Conrad's cock between those mounds that put cantaloupes to shame. With her mind corrupted by years upon years of visual experience, though Celine's body possessed little experience, she performed admirably, jerking Conrad's hefty rod between those massive mounds of hers in a squelchy rhythm. Left, right, up and down. Everything fell into a well-paced rhythm that grew faster alongside Celine's confidence. As the gyrating tit job's pace increased, Celine could feel Conrad's rod pulsing, tensing between her breasts alongside the occasional moan escaping his lips. Opening her mouth wide, Celine dropped on Conrad's shaft, sucking the tip into her greedy lips as she glided down his shaft. "Oh," Conrad groaned, but though he wished to press Celine's lips all the way down, he restrained himself, letting her move at a pace she could endure. Evidently, she could endure a lot. As if she'd practiced especially for this day, Celine managed to take Conrad's rod down to the hilt, burying her head between her enormous rack in the process. There, she stopped, enjoying this novel sensation with her lust-glazed, golden eyes. Upon getting a good feel, Celine glided her way back to the tip. This time she didn't stop, going up and down Conrad's shaft in a frantic slurping. Slurp, slurp, slurp. Combining her tit job with a sloppy blowjob, Celine jerked and gulped Conrad's cock, relishing in the mind-numbing taste of his precum as his meat rod grew increasingly tenser within her throat. While Celine devoured her meal with rapt devotion, the pulsing of Conrad's rod intensified, announcing his release. Sensing it, Celine increased her pace, bobbing at a blurry speed that threw her hair into disarray. Naturally, the stray tufts didn't stop her in her duty. Slurp, slurp, slurp. "Ooh," Conrad groaned, and released his load in a large jet of snow-white spunk. But instead of rocking back, Celine sheathed the unloading shaft within her throat, keeping it warm as a succession of milk jets flooded her mouth. Only when the last drop of Conrad's spunk left his shaft did she release his rod. Unsurprisingly, it still stood erect. Standing on her knees, Celine untied her dress, letting it drop on the sheets before crawling toward Conrad. His right index flickered downward, releasing a formless force that tore Celine's undergarments and tossed them onto the side. While her loins ached with consuming need, Celine's lips curled into a playful smile, and she placed her hands on Conrad's shoulders, straddling him unabashed with her large, perky but sandwiching his scalding rod. "I hear that nowadays, this is how you bestow new bloodlines. What then do you have in store for me?" Celine inquired with a wolfish grin. "That will depend on your performance. The more I come, the better deal you get." Conrad replied, while lifting up her chin with his right index. Nodding in approval, Celine said nothing more, lifting up her, but to position the tip of Conrad's cock with her dripping lower lips. With one slow but steady shove, she pressed herself down his rod, breaking her membrane as she slid all the way down his pubes. But if in others that move would at least produce a wince of pain, in Celine, it just wasn't pain enough. Instead, it was that sudden invasion and filling sensation that, for a second, made her mind go numb and her body tremble. As she settled on Conrad's cock, her eyes remained glued on his. A succession of slow thrusts followed, giving Celine time to adjust to her partner's massive girth. "Oh," she groaned, and alongside Conrad, activated the Law Revolution Creed, unleashing a kaleidoscope mist that wrapped them both and heightened their senses 1,000-fold. Celine's measured thrusts soon made way for an unrestrained self-hammering. The squelching of a voracious cunt gulping a massive rod mixed with the smacking of ass cheeks on warm balls as Celine pumped Conrad's cock, hard and fast, within her fold. Grabbing her ass cheeks, Conrad drove her harder and faster on his cock, filling her to the brim with his girth and hitting all sweet spots. The pounding then began. Chapter 521 Rathi's Change. Meanwhile, as Conrad drilled Celine's cunt, within one of the heaven-warding temple's most secretive chambers, a riveting, warlike woman clad in crimson armor sat crossed legs. Her hands clutched her cuisses, threatening to crush the goldy metal while protruding veins bulged on her temple and she bit her lower lip. Naturally, that woman was Blood Nether. Profane creature. Oh, damn you. Blood Nether groaned, letting a treasonous pleasure moan escape her full lips. See? Just 2 weeks of warm embraces and sexual delight, and you already know how to refer to me proper. Now that's what I call progress. Conrad, or rather, the Conrad devil within Blood Nether's heart chortled. In the weeks following their first clash, Conrad didn't give her a second of respite, reeking and tormenting her from inside out. If at first a great show of willpower allowed Blood Nether to resist his internal assaults, she now only hung by a thread. In her trillions of years of existence, never did Blood Nether experience such a setback. Even the road to transcendence wasn't that harrowing. Of course it wasn't. You transcended in the firmament. That's cheating. Try doing it in a lower realm. Conrad chided, effortlessly reading through Blood Nether's intimate thoughts. In the time spent within her Tao heart and mind, he'd accumulated a vast pool of useful knowledge, especially regarding the firmament. Things such as firmament fruits, paradises, and of course, the firmament tree. Now, Conrad knew exactly why his myriad world immortal blood had reached a bottleneck. His understanding of regretless forces also rose to new heights. But when again exposed to Conrad's dominion of her inner self, Blood Nether exploded. "Damn son of a bitch, I will peel off your skin." She snarled as her trembling face and cheeks reddened in outrage. "Oh, dirty talking? I like. Unfortunately, I'm not uncut, but I'm sure we can work something out," Conrad gleefully replied, and as his voice rang in her mind, Blood Nether could feel invisible hands grope her ass cheeks, breasts and cunt from beneath the armor's clad. Though she knew all occurred in her mind, she couldn't shake the feeling of shame and disgrace welling up within her chest. Shame, less motherfucker. Though she knew that such words only served to heighten Conrad's glee, trapped in a maelstrom of fury, Blood Nether had nothing else to say. "Don't you know that I bang my mom? 3 times a day, actually. Well, before my arrival in the celestial realm, that is. Man, I miss that cunt." Conrad sighed with deep sorrow that filled Blood Nether's eyes with warm tears and helplessness. "At the end of the day, you are the sovereign of a realm. How can you be this, crass? Apologies, but if I were a gentleman, I wouldn't be in your married pants. You. Aorg." That riposte was the last straw to a long series of mental abuse. Unable to endure further, Blood Nether dropped onto the bed, spasming in a guttural rage while smashing her flailing fists and feet onto the ground. Each blow sent tremors throughout the heaven-warding temple, preventing the cultivating Brahmas from finding a moment of peace. But after those 2 weeks of occupation, such events no longer alarmed them. Dragon Warden, you may feel complacent, but don't think that you can ever emerge victorious. Right now, you thwart us with your dirty tricks, but for how long do you think you can carry on? I will soon suppress you, and when you come to fetch the sword, your life is forfeit. Even if by some miracle you could defeat me, even if you became supreme, you can never defeat Regretless. Regretless is invincible. The past, present, and future will never have his match. The best you can hope for is to spend eternity hiding like a turtle." Blood Nether snarled, and though the words seemed taunting, they came from the bottom of her heart. Not just her. No one understood the true depth of Regretless' abilities believed he could be defeated by anything other than an almighty supreme or the firmament's sovereign. He was just that strong. And now that Conrad stood privy to Blood Nether's thoughts, he could understand why. However, that would never deter him. Without counting time gimmicks, Regretless took 10,000 years to put down the Omniverse. I will do it in less than 3,000, and you can witness it all from the top of my rod. Conrad began with a chortle that only heightened Blood Nether's rage. "But for now, I have an offer. A simple devil contract. If you agree to the terms, I will free you from the Heart Devil." Conrad offered, startling Blood Nether, whose limbs immediately went limp. "What are the terms?" "Simple. In less than 2 months, I will come to fetch my sword. When I do, we shall clash. If I lose, I will not seek escape. You shall do with me as you see fit. But if I win, I want your soul." Conrad offered, and as the words echoed in her mind, Blood Nether's eyes sparkled in anticipation. Meanwhile, within the Sea Dream domain. After filling all of Celine's holes with dripping spunk and pounding her to rest, Conrad left to head into the Sea Dream Temple's Cardinal Hall. There, Rethie lounged on the throne with her eyes shut close. But as soon as Conrad stepped into the room, they opened wide and her lips curled into a beaming smile. Without a word, and to Conrad's surprise, as he landed before her seat, Rethie stood up and knelt before Conrad's crotch, undoing his belt while ignoring the scent of Celine on his body. Conrad arched an eyebrow. "Interesting. Today you are quite proactive," Conrad remarked with a smile of amusement. The words didn't stop Rethie, and undisturbed, she untied his belt and lowered his pants to release his cock. "I figured I should start being truer to myself. Eternity can become quite stifling if you can't indulge in what you yearn for. And now, I just want to suck you dry," Rethie replied, breathing the words against Conrad's flaccid cock. Even in that form, it appeared more imposing than the average man's shaft. While blowing her hot breath against Conrad's cock, Rethie stretched her hand toward its base, seizing it with a firm yet gentle grip before lifting her eyes toward Conrad's. "May I?" she asked in a sultry tone while giving Conrad's cock a few pumps, letting it harden within her grip. "You may," Conrad leisurely replied, and without further ado, Rethie pressed her plump lips against his shaft, giving the tip a gentle kiss before sticking out her tongue and flicking it across the underside. At the same time, she directed Conrad toward the throne, and as he sat within, her mouth opened wide, taking his now fully erect cock down her throat for a sloppy blowjob. Chapter 522, Fate Calculations. While, unbeknown to the world, Blood Nether agreed to Conrad's contract and contacted her retainers, within the Sea Dream Temple's Cardinal Hall, the acting Temple Lord swallowed her man's cock with rapt devotion. And as he enjoyed Rethie's service, Conrad was amused to see that against all logic, Rethie showcased practice skills. Skills he didn't teach, yet recalled. Skills felt elsewhere, in a different time frame. When the realization settled within his mind, Conrad's smile broadened. "I am about to lock myself in secluded cultivation, and don't plan to come out before 1.5 months," Conrad stated, and as if spurred by the words, Rethie's pace shot up, with her head bobbing on Conrad's shaft at a blurry speed. Even as his cock stretched her throat, she neither gagged nor stopped, only going faster down on it until he released his spunk for her to swallow. The burst of snow-white spunk filled every nook and cranny of Rethie's mouth, bloating her cheeks as she released Conrad's cock to swallow his spunk. As the last drop slid down her throat, Rethie stood up, straddled Conrad, and held his cheeks within her hands. "Knowing you, seclusion will definitely involve some dual cultivation. Why not take me with you?" Rethie inquired in a gentle tone, concealing a pleading note. However, Conrad shook his head. "You are not a devil and therefore can't make an optimal use of this time," Conrad rejected in a firm, uncompromising tone. "Is that how the elite of the Thonian realm call themselves? Isn't there a way for me to become one?" Rethie inquired, seemingly oblivious to the meaning of the Devil Road, as well as she should be. Inwardly, though, Conrad sneered. "Too soon. Though I'm curious. You don't even know what that implies. Why are you so eager to embrace that road?" Conrad probed with his beaming smile unchanged. "Because it is your road, and I wish to be closer to you," Rethie directly replied, causing Conrad to arch his eyebrows. "Even if that means becoming a fell creature? So what? I'm a Devi, not a saintess. You should reserve that kind of question for the warden." The brief exchange ended with Rethie planting a kiss on Conrad's either side of Conrad's cheeks before lifting up her skirt and guiding his rod into her moist cunt. A heated sex romp followed. From beginning to end, Conrad didn't mention Rethie's summary execution of Kama. There was no need to. Leaving her behind, Conrad returned to the Myriad Dreams Valley where Verena currently organized the new disciples in the 3 traditional zones, the Outer Court, the Inner Court, and the Core Zone. Of the more than 84,000 new recruits, 71,800 joined the Outer Court, drinking from the blood fountain to become Chthonian guards or knights. 11,200 joined the inner court, drinking for its blood fountain to become Chthonian generals. The remaining 2,100 recruits joined the core zone, drinking from its blood fountain to become Chthonian lords. The Dao Heart-based subdivision filled the new disciples with soaring battle spirits. At the same time, Conrad's 96,000 legionaries filled the various courts. 88,700 added to the outer court, 5,800 to the inner court, and 1,500 for the core zone. The 12 Dragon Dukes became elders, with Conrad's consorts serving as Valley Ladies. The Myriad Dreams Valley now officially counted 150,000 disciples with more than 3 million of devil puppets acting as servants. Along with new bloodlines, the new disciples obtained their devil seeds and completed devil conversion to become heart devils. For the majority of them, such a strength leap was mind-boggling. However, when compared to their predecessors, they realized the gap between was outrageous. Right now, the weakest of Conrad's legionaries had reached the mid-stage of the Boundless Sea Devil Realm, while the Dragon Dukes already reached the mid-stage of the Grand Devil Realm. Kron received the Great Elder title in absentia. To say nothing of the core zone disciples who competed against Grand Devils, even those outer court disciples faced tremendous pressure. Fortunately, a plethora of time chambers existed within the Myriad Dreams Valley, with rich devil energies permeating the air. Catching up was but a matter of diligence. Although higher-level bloodlines naturally increase perception and the attunement to the world's forces, Conrad prepared batches of soul-clearing pills for his new disciples which Verena distributed across the 3 courts, scaling the resources depending on rank. Landing in the core zone, Conrad headed into the administration hall, from which Verena handled all matters. Talking about Verena, her appearance had undergone slight changes, with her hair and eyes becoming a lustrous silver while her body bathed in the intricate mist of destiny. Following her transcendence, she built on her Conrad-bestowed blood to create her own bloodline, the fate-defying immortal blood. In terms of strength, it surpassed Yvonne's current world serpent blood. An interesting trait of that lineage's owners was that they would all be born with an outrageous amount of good luck, and could even control luck in battle. Thinking about Verena's future opponents, Conrad couldn't help but release helpless sighs. Beautiful. I must say that you know beneath your stately exterior, you truly are a troll master. Conrad sighed as he walked into the administration hall. Seeing him, Verena shifted her attention from the servants surrounding her and dismissed them with a hand gesture. That's natural. How dull would life be if we had to remain caged in austere elegance? Sometimes, we should just get dirty. Verena replied while rising from her seat to step toward Conrad, dropping into his arms without a second thought. Well said. Conrad approved while wrapping his arms around Verena's back and stroking her curls. For the next 1.5 months, the Myriad Dreams Valley will go into extreme cultivation mode. I will also go into seclusion and use all my recent gains to reach the highest strength possible. Naturally, I will also use this time to refine the heaven-swallowing pills, after which we will invade the heaven-warding temple to seize the sword. Conrad paused, lifting his right hand to summon a primal sun lotus. Your cultivation has now reached the mid-stage of the Grand Devil Realm. By refining this 9-star god medicine, you should be able to rise to the Prime Devil Realm. Unfortunately, your understanding of the Devil Road is still lacking. Go into seclusion to comprehend the mysteries, and use this lotus to break through. Conrad instructed, and Verena let go of his back to grasp the lotus within her hands. Understood. However, there is no need for an invasion. In 2 months, driven by Blood Nether, the Warden will dispatch invitations to all within the 3 realms to try their luck at seizing or destroying the god-executing immortal sword. You can just join the fun. Meanwhile, we shall keep troops on the outside, ready to slam them from in and out. Verena replied, having already foreseen those events. Chapter 523 Nothingness? With fate transcendence at her disposal, within the three realms, there weren't many events Verena couldn't foresee. Bloodnether and the Warden's future moves weren't part of the lot. I see. That will work just fine. Anything else I need to know? Conrad inquired in a half-serious, half-jesting tone. In 10 seconds, Bloodnether's retainers will start crossing the Omniverse to hide within the Heaven-Warding Temple. Her immortal Bloodguard contains 300 experts, with the weakest being early-stage overgods, and the three strongest, primordial deities. A week afterward, the Titan domain will receive interesting reinforcements and resources, then prepare a large-scale attack on the Sea Dream Temple, the Radiant Light Mountain, and the Eternal Void Sect. Calculating departure, arrival, and preparations, they will attack the night before your return. Verena informed, causing Conrad to nod in earnest approval. Now, he was starting to wonder how he managed his existence before Verena's fate transcendence. Can you handle it? Not without revealing the Myriad Dreams Valley's true strength. However, we can use a cloaking formation to keep those events hidden. Verena replied without a shred of doubt. As for the interesting reinforcements she referred to, even without clarification, Conrad could guess who they were. His mind then drifted toward a certain character, and for a second, his eyes narrowed. Can you calculate the fate of individuals beyond the celestial realm? Conrad inquired, for although Verena predicted the moves from the firmament, that was due to seeing through Bloodnether's future. She couldn't actually examine the firmament's residents. My vision is still limited by my devil sense, which, right now, can only cover the zenith heaven layer. To say nothing of Tauroth, even those in the other heaven layers are beyond my reach. Verena shook her head, clearly aware of who Conrad wished to probe. But as he readied to abandon the topic, she pursued. However, if you can give me a current projection of him, that is doable. Hearing this, Conrad beamed and sent Kron a mental message. A truth screen then appeared within the hall, towering above both Conrad and Verena, as it showcased the figure of Tauroth sitting on his dark purple throne. Glancing toward him, Verena released her fate-transcendent sight to peer into Tauroth's future. Her eyes immediately narrowed. Well, I have good and bad news, Verena began, speaking with a gravity that contrasted with her previous level tone. Good news? Tauroth dies in the coming months. There is no scenario where he survives, Verena declared, making Conrad's eyes widen in disbelief. Bad news? This time, however, Verena heaved a helpless sigh. The events surrounding his death involve either you, fate-transcendent experts, or supremes, or maybe all of them. In any case, I can't see the details. However, his fate standard ends in less than 3 months. Therefore, he can't live beyond. Verena followed, causing puzzlement to flash within Conrad's eyes. At the moment, there was no reason why he'd kill Tauroth in that time frame. He also couldn't see how the Demon King would incur the wrath of transcendent-level experts. As for Supremes, throughout the Omniverse, only 2 remained. The Dharma Lord and Regretless. How could Tauroth possibly challenge either? However, as a fate embodiment, Conrad knew that the end of a fate standard was tantamount to death. Besides reincarnation, there was no way around it. Reincarnation, could it be no? Isn't that a bit far-fetched? Conrad wondered as an outrageous thought sprung within his mind. If that were true, then the web surrounding the 3 realms, no, the Omniverse, was tighter than he expected. He had to take preemptive measures. Kron, immediately capture Tauroth, Conrad ordered in a mental message, putting his hypothesis to the test. As you command, Master, Kron replied, and vanished to dive into Tauroth's palace, bypassing all barriers to land in the Southern King's throne room. Without warning, Kron made his move, bolting toward Tauroth, who seemed wholly unaware of his presence. But as Kron's right hand clutched at Tauroth, whoosh, it met thin air. Tauroth vanished, leaving behind a dispelling afterimage laced in a formless, deadening force that chilled Kron to the bones. Too soon, way too soon. Tauroth's voice echoed within the hall, but even as the sound lingered, he was long gone. To say nothing of Verena or Kron, even Conrad's face violently distorted. He vanished in nothingness. Conrad realized in dismay. No wonders his emotional spectrum was incomplete. Talroth possessed nothingness insight. But how did he learn it? Obtaining insight into infiniteness or nothingness was one of the most challenging tasks of the cultivation world. Even for Conrad, he first needed to achieve transcendence, then step into the world where all forces stood in harmony to rapidly sense and achieve infiniteness insight. Clearly, Talroth didn't have transcendence. If he did, with his peak stage legendary god cultivation base, Kron couldn't possibly make him run. Again, Conrad's mind swirled, chafing in a maelstrom of absurd conjectures. None seemed reasonable. Yet, one thing was certain. From beginning to now, Talroth wielded the chessboard. And now that he fell into the shadows, who could thwart him? Worse, Conrad was starting to think that there was one missing piece to this puzzle, a critical piece of information that prevented him from painting the whole picture and allowed Talroth to play all. Never mind, come fetch a few primal sun lotuses for Yvonne, Else, and Gulistan. Afterward, I will go into seclusion. Conrad ordered, and instantly, Kron appeared by his side to collect the goods before returning to Hell. Now feeling a new sense of urgency, Conrad gave Verena a few directives, put more resources in the hands of his refining and alchemy pavilions, then left to fetch Cassilia and Heidi. Bringing the two alongside him, Conrad stepped into the cultivation hall prepared for this event, a miniature world where a towering mansion stood. Leading the girls inside, Conrad left them in their assigned room, then dived toward the main hall. First, he needed to harvest a tremendous quantity of cultivation bases from both Chandra's consorts and Talrotha's gifts, then cultivate with his daughter and disciple to make them break through multiple levels. Only then could he fall into meditation and digest the gains. Of course, Conrad had not forgotten a critical element of the first session. As soon as he reached the hall, Conrad summoned his mighty pig, the former Moon Lord, Chandra, who, out of thin air, appeared at his left. Oink, oink. Chandra greeted in pig's language while bowing toward his master. Little Dra, I have a surprise you, said Conrad with a wolfish grin that made poor Chandra shiver in fright. Chapter 524 Chandra's Reward. As the gong of alarm boomed in Chandra's mind, Conrad waved his hand, causing the former Moon Lord's 3,000 consorts to appear within the gargantuan hall. They stood in order of cultivation and position, with Chandra's primary wife, the only half-step legendary goddess of the lot, standing at the helm with his ancestral goddess-level consorts right behind. The rest lined up in similar fashion. In the very instant that they appeared, the 3,000 goddesses curtsied toward Conrad. Greetings, master, they said in tandem, and as he swept the scene, Conrad was forced to admit that Chandra's choice of consorts was indeed outstanding. Even in the celestial world where beauties abounded, those undoubtedly stood out. In terms of looks, though the Nagas and moon spirits fell a step short to the Maras and dream spirits, they possessed a unique, stately yet enticing air the others couldn't showcase. Better, the moonlight swirling around their form was a marvel of its own. On typical days, Chandra relished in that sight. But on this occasion, he floundered, staggered, and recoiled on 5 steps. Alas, an invisible barrier stopped him in his backpedaling and pushed him right back beside Conrad. Despicable ingrate, don't you know that this your day of glory? I specifically prepared them all to help you break through in bloodline and cultivation level. How can you be this ungrateful? Conrad snarled in indignation, and hearing the heartfelt, wrong tone lacing his words, for a moment, Chandra truly believed he'd misjudged his master. But the moment didn't last, for he recalled who he was dealing with. Even a pig could see that today, wanton mental abuse awaited him. Oink, oink. Chandra pleaded in words that translated as, Master, please spare me. Alas, his supplications fell on deaf ears. I command you to stay where you are and not miss the tiniest bit of this show. It will be of tremendous help to your cultivation. By the time we're done, reaching the peak of the legendary god rank is a must. Half-step over god isn't impossible, and if you're particularly diligent, in the nearby future, becoming an over god is a certainty. Conrad reminded before stepping toward Chandra's former consorts. On the scene, only the half-step legendary goddess and the 10 ancestral goddesses were of genuine use to his cultivation. The rest just served his profane lust and depraved mind. As he stepped toward them, knowing and anticipating what was to come, Chandra's wife and primary consorts stood up and rushed toward Conrad, cluttering the space around him like new maids eagerly seeking merit. "Master, please let us undress you." Chandra's wife and primary consorts requested like a submissive choir, and nodding in approval, Conrad stretched out his arms, letting them undo his belt, remove his imperial robe, and lower his pants before the helpless Chandra. Witnessing this scene, Chandra felt his heart tighten, squeezed by an invisible force that clutched at his very soul. Yet, at the same time, his cultivation base rotated. 5,000 godheads appeared at his back, each rippling with tremendous god force. All along, 5,000 had been Chandra's limit, and he failed to take another step forward. But as he observed his consorts undressing of their new master, the 5,001st was condensing at a rapid pace, and his cultivation base thrived alongside it. Conrad's clothes tumbled onto the ground, revealing his empyrean body to the goddess's startled eyes. For a second, their mouths curved into an O shape, but basking in his unconstrained scent rapidly flooded their minds with salacious thoughts. It didn't take long for their eyes to glaze with lust. Not only they, but the thousands of consorts standing behind fared no better, trembling with soaring needs while squeezing their inner thighs against one another. Chandra's cultivation speed heightened, with a second and third godhead forming in succession. At the same time, tears filled his eyes. "Oink, oink," he lamented in pig's language, but to no avail. "Undress," Conrad ordered, and the former consorts unanimously disrobed, tossing their clothes and undergarments toward Chandra, who could only begrudgingly watch over them. More godheads followed. "Ah!" the goddesses moaned while rubbing their drenched inner thighs against one another. With his quasi-firmament bloodline level, Conrad's floral scent had turned into a mind-boggling aphrodisiac that could make any legendary goddess spread her legs with just a whiff. Exposed to it for so long, the goddesses soon lost their minds, became slaves of their lust, and swarmed every available inch of Conrad's body, rubbing themselves on him when they couldn't find a part to lick or suckle. Faster than the others, Chandra's wife knelt before Conrad's cock, which had already risen to attention, and while holding onto his waist, opened her mouth wide to swallow his rod in one go. "Unfair. You're too greedy. Give me some." Complaints broke out left and right, as the other consorts fought for a piece of the supreme rod. The scene soon became chaotic, with 4 of Chandra's former consorts licking and sucking Conrad's massive rod as another 2 slurped his balls. Of the remaining 5, 2 rubbed their cunts against Conrad's thighs while stroking his six-packs and licking his broad chest. Another 2 lay on the ground, rubbing themselves on his legs while the last licked his back. Slurp, slurp, slurp. "Ah!" they sucked and moaned in delight. In a flash, Chandra condensed 50 godheads. At the same time, his bloodline strength rose substantially. Alas, this progress came at the price of a flood of warm tears. "Oy-yi-yink," Chandra wailed, stretching out his trembling hands toward that picture of debauchery his eyes found so traumatizing. His complaints found no audience. Conrad's hands roamed his former consorts' bodies, first pinching their erect nipples and groping their breasts and asses, slapping a few jiggling cheeks in the process, before inserting his fingers in their rears and fingering them to ecstasy. "Oh!" the finger-blessed groaned and quivered in their orgasm. Those rubbing their cunts against Conrad's legs came soon afterward. Conrad released a contented sigh and unloaded his large jets of spunk on the faces of Chandra's kneeling former consorts. 200 godheads followed. Alas, this was but a warm-up. In the same order of strength, the 3,000 consorts lined up before Conrad, bending over on all four and sticking out their butts toward him. With a wolfish grin, and to Chandra's supreme dismay, Conrad grew a second cock, as massive as the original one, and aimed at Chandra's former wife, slamming his rods into her ass and cunt with one direct thrust. Her walls clenched around his meat rods, squeezing them as if her body and soul couldn't bear letting them go. Oh! The Naga goddess groaned in delight while her eyes rolled back. 300 godheads grew behind Chandra. Conrad pulled back to the hilt and slammed his cocks all the way down in a succession of rapid thrust. With their level of wetness and desperate hunger for his rods, going slow would only drive them mad. How could Conrad bear harming such willing ladies? Yes, more master, more. Without restraint, Conrad hammered at the goddess' ass, plowing her cunt and rear with barbaric speed as she groaned in frenzied delight. And as Conrad pumped his cock in Chandra's former wife, the latter saw his godheads multiply. Conrad's Law Revolution creed kicked into gear, and as he rammed the luscious holes, the harvesting began. Chapter 525 Grand Harves. Conrad's pounding of Chandra's consorts carried on for an entire week, during which all saw their cultivation harvested. But as they lay, groggy and cum-drenched on the ground, Conrad selected the 500 most worthy to turn into devils and add to his personal harem. The rest were promoted to imperial maids. Although they'd have to recultivate, with the J dynasty's methods and resources, fast progress was a must. The time within this mansion flew 3,000 times faster than in the outside. Therefore, in truth, only 3 minutes had passed. Still, Conrad restrained his energies, preventing a breakthrough. Meanwhile, Chandra, who wept and spasmed on the ground, was undoubtedly the greatest beneficiary. Thanks to Conrad's generous gift, his cultivation rose from late-stage legendary god to half-step over god, while his cuckold pig blood rose to startling heights, now rivaling his former primogen blood. Alas, it had also reached its limit and couldn't grow further. Leaving the sobbing hog behind, Conrad left for the second room where Tauritha's gifts awaited. The rising stairs of nearly 10,000 goddesses welcomed Conrad's entrance in the second room. There, Batet and Silvaz, the two demon primogens, lay alongside Bumi, Terra, Conrad's 4 half-sisters, and legions of succubi, maenads, and lilims. Various shades of demonic energies filled the air, creating an atmosphere that put the two Devi in the room ill at ease. First, Conrad set Terra aside, bestowed her with a devil seed before sweeping his prizes with his icy eyes. Assailed by his floral scent, to say nothing of the demonesses and fiends, even the likes of Bumi, Batet, and Silvaz couldn't resist. The bloodthirsty Silvaz, the Taurithan-engrossed Batet, and the stately Bumi all dropped on their knees, trembling with aching need, moistening cunts, and a voracious thirst for Conrad's naked body. The palpable scent of the thousands of women having preceded them in the past week never startled their minds, unable to win over Conrad's mind-boggling pheromones. Seeing this, Conrad inwardly sighed. As he engaged in debauchery, he could feel the barriers of his bloodline crumble. It wouldn't be long before it reached the firmament level, and by the time it did, perhaps even female overgods couldn't withstand the pressure of his scent for more than a breath of time. Without a need for his mist and desire flames, Conrad's scent did all the job, making allegiances and thoughts inconsequential as the infernal goddesses shot toward him, contesting for the right to get first taste of his empyrean body. Faster than her peers, Batet won the race. The goddesses' clothes didn't survive long, torn in booming grunts as they crowded Conrad's form. Meeting the challenge, Conrad assumed his half-Chthonian form of a golden-eyed, dark blue-skinned, horned and winged giant whose every step made the world quiver. A multitude of rods and arms grew to sate and pound the craving goddesses. This time, the harvesting carried on for 2 weeks. 2 weeks of relentless moaning, pounding, and maddened debauchery. 2 weeks at the end of which the 10,000 goddesses lay cum-drenched, without an ounce of cultivation, but with empyrean bliss written all over their faces. Again, Conrad made his choice, this time picking 1,500 from the lot, while turning the rest into palace maids. Naturally, the former primogens were among the chosen ones. Leaving them behind, Conrad stepped toward the final room where his daughter and disciple awaited his visit. Room 3, Heidi and Cassilia. 3 weeks. It had been since the arrival of Heidi and Cassilia within the mansion, and as expected the two spent their time in dramatically different ways. While Cassilia sat cross-legged in meditation, cultivating the Law Revolution creed, Heidi studied the lovemaking arts from detailed, disreputable books while pondering what the right outfit should be. So, should I go with this peacock mini dress or belly dancer outfit? I also have a harem slave outfit in mind, but that's perhaps a bit too much. Heidi rattled off, breaking Cassilia's focus as she exposed her to a succession of scandalous outfits. Unable to endure further disturbance, Cassilia opened her eyes, forgoing the showcased outfits to stare directly at Heidi's icy blue eyes. In any case, you'll end up undressed. Why do you care for what saucy outfit you wear? Cassilia inquired in a serious tone. Bah, amateurish words. Don't you know that the outfit's sauciness will determine performance? From pounding duration to how much cum we wring, it is all interconnected. Heidi scoffed at Cassilia's ignorance and motioned toward her erotic books for emphasis. Having nothing else to say, Cassilia shut her mouth and indexed the peacock-feathered samba belly dancer outfit floating at Celine's right. Never in her wildest dreams could Cassilia imagine that such a scandalous outfit existed. Throughout the vast celestial realm, perhaps they couldn't find a second one. Good choice, your tastes indeed don't shame the house. Heidi approved with a succession of vigorous nods. Used to the girl's flippantness, Cassilia made no other comment and fell back to silent meditation. According to the previous arrangement, it shouldn't be long before Conrad returned from his harvesting. The time for her first dual cultivation session approached with great strides, but unlike Heidi, who grew up corrupted by the Imperial Jade Palace, as a normal individual, Cassilia couldn't help but feel nervous. The more nervous she felt, the more she locked herself in meditation. Smelling Cassilia's nervousness, Heidi was inwardly delighted. The more nervous the competition was, the better. Alas, she didn't doubt that when faced with her father's empyrean body, every bit of nervousness would vanish from Cassilia's mind, making place for the same hunger as all the rest. How sorrowful! And as if to echo her words, a series of unhurried footsteps clattered beyond the door, announcing the visit of the only man in the mansion. Cassilia's nervousness peaked while Heidi finished getting dressed and beamed in anticipation. The door flew open, revealing a naked, 9 meters tall man of flawless musculature and empyrean looks that made so many drool with hunger and filled others with envy. As soon as Heidi and Cassilia's eyes locked on this picture of transcendental perfection, everything else stopped mattering, and they failed to take their eyes away. Better, they gulped in sync. I thought I'd spare you the trouble of undressing me. Conrad began with a smirk, awakening the two from their torpor. Realizing how easily they'd lost their composure, they blushed in shame. This time, even Heidi no longer showcased any bravado. Fortunately, her father took mercy on them and didn't unleash his floral scent. Otherwise, the results would have been hard to fathom. Chapter 526 Master, Daughter, Disciple. For a second, Conrad's eyes went between Heidi and Cassilia, observing their shifting expressions and reddening faces with mild amusement. He then stepped forward, sauntering toward them with his arms folded beneath his chest. As he did, his cock hardened, going from flaccid to half erect, even then standing at a startling length and girth that made the wholly inexperienced Cassilia tremble as she imagined all the things that Rod was meant to do to her. By the time Conrad stopped before them, Heidi had regained her guts, and she smirked at Conrad. "Dad, what do you think of my outfit?" Heidi asked as she twirled on tiptoes, showcasing her scandalous samba dancer outfit that left her pert breasts and abs wholly exposed. Better, the beaded skirt only held the upper half of that pert, but leaving the lower half exposed to Conrad's ogling. "I like." Conrad nodded in approval, and his half-erect cock rose straight like a spear, a meaty, flaming spear pulsing with the need to plow gripping snatches. Cassilia's eyes locked on Conrad's imposing member, unwittingly clenching her inner thighs as her loins ached further. There was an irresistible force swirling around that member, a force so alluring that though the words couldn't leave her lips, Cassilia knew she wanted it. Heidi had less reserves and barefooted, tiptoed toward Conrad, nestling against his left shoulder while stroking his bare chest with her slender fingers. "Dad, I want," Heidi purred, fluttering eyelashes as she curled her lips in an inviting pout. "Want what? Let me hear it," Conrad asked in a teasing tone, to which Heidi replied by trailing her fingers across his abs before stroking the base of his cock and tracing its throbbing veins. "To do my filial duty and wring you dry," the devil's daughter whispered in her profane father's ears. As the word left her lips, her heart drummed against his arm, threatening to burst from her exposed chest. Conrad welcomed the honesty with an impromptu kiss, seizing Hyde's lips within his and invading her mouth with his ravenous tongue. "MHM." Though first startled, Heidi welcomed the move, giving Conrad free access and meeting his tongue with hers. Conrad's cock hardened against her thigh, sending waves of excitement in her trembling heart as he placed one hand on her waist and the other on her back. The coiling of their tongues soon sapped Hyde's strength. Her knees weakened and she abandoned herself to Conrad's arms. Exposed to this profane scene, Cassilia squeezed her thighs tighter while clenching her arms around her breasts to prevent the urge to finger herself. But as both Cassilia and Hyde's thighs moistened, Conrad broke the slurpy smooch, and while still holding onto Heidi, shifted his eyes toward Cassilia. "What about you? What do you want?" Conrad asked Cassilia while his tongue trailed Hyde's flawless neck, making her moan and tremble under the unprecedented sensation. "Ah." The combination of Hyde's whimpering and Conrad's subduing gaze destroyed the last bits of Cassilia's inhibition. "I want to serve you, master, to give and devote myself to you," the disciple straightforwardly replied, pulling a nod of approval from her master. "Then step forward." Conrad beckoned, and as if spurred by an invisible force, Cassilia strode toward him, stopping at his right and separated by Heidi only by the burning meat rod between them. With his right hand, Conrad enlaced Cassilia's waist, the left he kept around Hyde's, and as he stroked their pert bodies, his lips went between theirs, going from one to the other as they exchanged series of slurpy smooches. "MHM, MHM, MHM." "Ah." While one moaned in his lips, the other did so out loud, with her ragged breath brushing his cheek. And while at first, Conrad only gently stroked their backs, butts, and hips, soon he was grabbing their ass cheeks within his hands, sinking his hands into those firm, plump, and juicy cheeks before teasing their butthole from beneath the fabric of their dresses. With every one of his touches, mild vibration waves assailed the girls' bodies, sending their already fragilized minds into chaos as their breathing grew more ragged and their moans louder. "MHM, MHM, MHM." "Oh, oh, oh." The two moaned in tandem. Conrad then broke the kiss, letting them moan alongside one another while his hand left their rears to fondle their dripping lower lips, still beneath the fabric, almost. In Hyde's case, no undergarment stood beneath, and with her skirt being that short, Conrad's fingers landed on her dripping pussy. If the touch of Hyde's raw pussy didn't stop Conrad, feeling her father's fingers caress her lower lips instantly made Heidi tremble in a mini-orgasm. But at her left, Cassilia wasn't faring much better. Though her dress stood between Conrad's fingers and her cunt, With every bit of caresses, her body shook, and her mouth spread wide open. Meanwhile, her panties failed to contain the dripping of her cunt, drenching not only her inner thighs but sliding toward the ground. Now, as their eyes and moans screamed delight, the ground beneath the two was quickly turning into a sloppy mess. Lifting Caecilia's dress, Conrad slipped his hand past her panties to sneak his fingers into her cunt. Hit by a new wave of electricity, she instantly orgasmed on his fingers. Alas, he gave neither of them respite, and while his fingering speed shot up, he increased the pressure by pressing his thumbs against their clits, thereby pleasuring them on several fronts. "Ah, Dad." "Yes, Dada." "Oh, Master, oh." The two groaned in a succession of mind-numbing orgasms. Their knees had long since given out, their balance maintained solely by them clinging on Conrad's shoulders. But even that was becoming hard to manage, and as they hit the umpteenth moment of bliss, the two shook. Unable to cling further, they dropped toward the ground. Wrapping his arms around their waists, Conrad stopped the fall and pulled them back against his chest. "TSS, TSS, TSS. At this rate, I will have to do all the servicing." Conrad chided and activated the Law Revolution Creed. Holding the two by their waists, Conrad lifted them from the ground and carried their groggy selves toward the velvet-sheeted bed prepared for their incoming mess. Fueled by the kaleidoscope mist, Caecilia and Heidi regained enough strength to activate their own Law Revolution creeds. By the time Conrad lowered them on the velvet sheets, their kaleidoscope mists merged with his, hiding them three in the swirling haze. Conrad stretched out his hands, causing a formless wave of telekinetic forces to free them of their garments, exposing their bare bodies to his icy eyes. For a second, Conrad stood still, enjoying the sight of their luscious bare bodies. Although they possessed different bloodlines, due to Conrad transforming Caecilia into a Chthonian dragon, the two shared the same icy blue eyes, black hairs, and lustrous snow-white skin. But while Hyde's hair trailed below her butt, Caecilia's stopped at the middle of her back, and she held it in a braided ponytail. Meanwhile, as he relished in the sight of their pert bodies, Caecilia and Heidi stretched their nimble feet toward Conrad's rod, stroking it between their toes in a tantalizing cock-jerking. With a smile, Conrad stopped their feet. Heidi on top, Caecilia below, Conrad ordered while motioning for Heidi to lie above Caecilia. Between his pair of disciple and daughter, the latter undoubtedly was the most apt at taking that role, and she did, climbing on top of Caecilia while wiggling her lovely butt at Conrad. Her hands she kept on either side of her partner's face. Spurred by Conrad, the two spread their legs, giving him better access as he climbed on top of the bed and released his second rod. While the two tensed with a mixture of expectation and apprehension of the unknown, Conrad released a small portion of his floral scent, instantly relaxing them as he aimed his shafts at their still dripping cunts. "Dad, Master," they invited him, and with one measured thrust, Conrad spread open their pussy lips, broke their membranes, and filled their uncharted love tunnels with his massive rods. Ah! The two winced, hit by a jolt of pain. But at that time, Conrad's bloodline forces erupted, replacing pain by heightened pleasure while their tight-fitting snatches accustomed to his girth. Meanwhile, as he explored the new territories, Conrad was forced to admit that those were the most gripping cunts he'd plowed in centuries. And even before he made another move, both sucked and squeezed him in, contracting and expanding around his pulsing rods as if eager to wring his milk. Naturally, such a trial couldn't faze the profane prince. Gliding back, Conrad dragged his cocks against the friction of his girls' cunts, stopping at their entrances before driving back inside. With every thrust, their tits bounced and their bodies shook, and their gasping breaths intertwined as they moaned against one another. "Ah! Ah!" The two moaned, enthralled by the snaking moves of Conrad's hips while he marked every inch of their love tunnels. Gradually, his pace rose, and when certain that they'd adapted to his rods in body and mind, Conrad freely enhanced the speed, pounding them harder and faster, thereby making the rhythm of their moans shoot up. In that rowdy mixture of meshing bodies, the pounding began. Draping the girls with his towering, muscular frame, Conrad smacked his hips against their folding-ass cheeks, marking them with his full balls as his cocks went up and down their tight-fitting snatches. Under his relentless thrusts, their intertwined bodies rocked, swaying up and down while their cunts' walls clenched and squeezed his meat rods, pulling him closer to release with every move. Soon, Conrad's hips blurred, and like a rutting animal devoid of reason, he plugged the girls' dripping holes, hammering them as they squealed in delight until his throbbing rods could no longer restrain their spunk. Oh! A low grunt escaped from Conrad's lips, and he unloaded his large jets of spunks within his daughter and disciple's love tunnels, painting their walls in a profane white. The two's eyes rolled back, their tongues lolled out, and their bodies shook in a mind-boggling orgasm. But of course, this was but the beginning. Chapter 527, Heaven's Calamity Part 1. For numerous hours Conrad rammed the girls' cunts, bursting his loads deep in their love tunnels before shifting them in other positions and carrying on across days of blissful time. A full 3 days of ardent dual cultivation went by before even the Law Revolution creed was no longer enough to allow the two to carry on. At the end of the session, the two directly rose to the late stage of the Boundless Sea Devil realm. And after refining the pills Conrad had set aside for them, they'd undoubtedly break through a few more levels. Having done all that needed to be, Conrad left them behind to enter 3 centuries of secluded cultivation. With a massive quantity of harvested energies, high-grade pills, and a primal sun lotus at his disposal, this session would undoubtedly yield the highest result ever. As he closed his eyes, sitting cross-legged within his silent chambers, 2 black devil rings appeared behind Conrad, bringing alongside them a massive burst of nefarious energies. On the outside, the world still spun. 2 weeks after Conrad's seclusion, word spread that the Warden and the Overlord broke through, reaching the early stage of the Overgod rank and instantly mending their wounds. In the instant they did, the world was startled to see the concentration of spiritual energies within the heaven-warding temple and the Overlord's palace rise to startling heights, thereby benefiting all their subordinates. But they weren't the only ones making progress. Urzel and Asherah both reached the peak of the legendary god rank, while Dahlgren took half a step into the overgod rank. Undoubtedly, those deities all relied on time chambers and new opportunities to accelerate their breakthroughs. But as the world expected Talroth to stun it with rapid growth, news that the southern king of hell had suddenly vanished echoed, alarming the world. Many assumed he left the southern domain to covertly seek opportunities, while others believed he'd been captured by the other kings. Meanwhile, in the silence of the celestial realm, following the unexpected visit of foreign experts, the Titan domain covertly grew. Before, due to incomplete Tao inheritances, no Titan managed to return to the legendary god rank. But as soon as those foreign experts arrived, they solved the problem, allowing the hundreds of Titans half-step into the legendary god rank to break through their shackles. Now, in the shadows of the Titan domain, a formidable battalion hid, driving the Titans' progresses while readying for a large-scale invasion. Thus, another 2 weeks passed, and as the first month following Conrad's seclusion ended, within a small portion of the firmament's ever-jade sky, a choking, chilling dark night appeared and spread as regretless youngest sibling opened his eyes. Breaking Conrad's curse, Night swept the world with his deep, black eyes, using his truth transcendence to reconstruct the events following his forced coma. Without a word, Night stood up, summoned his eternal night guard, and shot toward the celestial realm. Now, of the higher-ups, only the loitering Cloud and the comatose Regretless remained within the firmament. But as Cloud's eyes remained closed, his god sense shifted, locking on Regretless, who remained cross-legged and as immovable as a mountain. Close. Increasingly closer. Night alone is problem enough. But when Regretless awakens, I'm afraid your best bet is to spend eternity in hiding. Conrad, how will you handle this? Cloud wondered in a level tone that made his stance hard to figure out. Meanwhile, within the world woven by his demons, Regretless now stood before a handsome, suave middle-aged man, with tied golden hair and a Guan Yu-like beard folded on his thighs. The two sat cross-legged, separated only by a chessboard. But for some reason, within that world, Regretless didn't possess the icy blue hair and crimson eyes unique to his Omniarch bloodline. Instead, he showed the same black hair and eyes of the time before his rebirth. The golden-haired man wore a loose Taoist robe, and around him, a compelling air mixing extraordinariness and gentleness swirled. But though the Empyrean dragon blood was evident in his slit golden eyes and scent, before him, Regretless eyes flashed a mixture of politeness, deference, and proximity of a junior toward a beloved elder. Imperial uncle, it's your turn. Regretless said in a cheerful tone while motioning toward the chessboard, for indeed, the man was his deceased uncle, Highest Dragon, the Empyrean Dragon Clan's great elder, or more accurately, a representation stemming from Regretless' inner demons. Regretless, you've already crossed the passes of Peerless and your mother. Why won't you let go of me? Highest Dragon sighed, shaking his head as he moved a black knight on the chessboard. Aware that Regretless' hatred for the Empyrean was only rivaled by his love for their imperial uncle, Conrad made it his final pass, knowing that even if Regretless could see through the illusions, he couldn't easily shake them. Highest Dragon wasn't just Regretless' uncle. He was his father, mother, master, and savior. If not for Highest Dragon's teaching and resources, with the Imperial Dragon Clan's suppression, Regretless could never set foot on the cultivation road. If not for Highest Dragon's shelter, he would have died at least 10,000 times. If not for Highest Dragon sacrificing his life to ensure Regretless and his siblings' reincarnation, there would be no Omniarch, no Tribulation Demon. All Regretless was and had, he owed it to that one person. Undoubtedly, Peerless' betrayal and even his mother's wrongful death could never compare to the pain he felt upon realizing Highest Dragon's sacrifice and execution at the hands of his father, Celestial Slaughter. Trillions of years may pass, but the void you left behind remains. Imperial Uncle, in this life, my greatest regret was to not have been filial. To have spent the greatest part of the time fate granted me dallying with a woman instead of remaining by your side. If I could turn the wheels of time, then I do not want Peerless. I do not want to be supreme. I only wish to stay by your side, to be your son instead of his, and serve you throughout eternity. Alas, even I cannot alter that past. Therefore, I can only be selfish and forget the outside world to enjoy this illusory moment of peace, if only for an instant. Regretless replied before moving another chess piece. But though his tone remained mild, in his every word, a deeply rooted sorrow lingered. Meanwhile, time still flew by. 2 weeks succeeded one another, and as the second came to an end, within the celestial realm's icy blue night sky, the shadow of a pale blue planet appeared. From that planet, 3 formless waves of experts emerged, 3 battalions all shooting toward heaven's remaining cardinal sects, the Sea Dream Temple, the Eternal Void Sect, and the Radiant Light Mountain. Chapter 528 Heaven's Calamity Part 2. Of the 3 teams dispatched from the Titan domain, the one targeting the Sea Dream Temple was by far the strongest. But even then, as the 2 other forces descended upon them, the Radiant Light Mountain and the Eternal Void Sect stood no chance. It was a blitzkrieg. Though time chambers and seclusion allowed their 2 strongest elders to break through to the legendary god rank, the Radiant Light Mountain never saw what hit them. Mountain-sized fists descended at 10,000 times the speed of light, crushing both the sect and Radiant Mountain supporting it. Only the boom following the sect's collapse announced to the world that the Radiant Light Mountain had been exterminated. In a flash, the trillions of lives in the Radiant Light domain all rose, staring slack-jawed at the sight of the collapsing ancient mountain. Those celestial towns, cities, and sects bordering it failed to move in time, and all ended crushed by the debris. Beneath godhood, none could escape being crushed by random boulders. But as the discarnate souls of millions of deceased sages and saints swelled the surroundings of the Radiant Light Mountain's destruction, the Eternal Void sect suffered the same fate. Well, almost. When 3 mountain-sized fists descended on the sect, only Durga sensed the threat and rose to oppose it. But with her injured body, there was nothing she could do. Bang! One of the 3 fists slammed Durga's soaring form, sending her flying right into her sect's ground. Unrestrained, the 3 fists tumbled, crashing into the Eternal Void sect and squashing it alongside the mountain range supporting and surrounding it. The Radiant Light domain scene repeated, with the flattened mountain's debris shooting toward the nearby celestial towns and cities, crushing millions of lives in a heartbeat. Meanwhile, Durga's mangled body lay within the ruins of her sect, squashed beyond recognition and unable to move an inch. But even as death hit her, she couldn't understand how and why such a thing occurred. Ha 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 ha. How unsightly. In the past, when your despicable forces descended on our Titan domain, sneak attacked our wounded lord and slaughtered our legendary gods, your conceit filled the sky. Who would expect that billions of years afterward, you can't even withstand one blow? Good-for-nothing ants. A gargantuan Titan's voice resounded from within heaven's sky, alarming all citizens of the various domains. It's the Titan domain. The Titan domain is making a large-scale attack on the celestial world. Many Deva gods realized in fright. Impossible. How could the Titan domain possibly be this powerful? What's the use of knowing that? Run to the Heaven Warding Temple. Confusion and commotions broke out throughout the 13 domains before the most lucid deities led their brethren toward the Heaven Warding Temple to avoid calamities. This was the logical move. In the past, when heaven and hell contended in realm wars, the Heaven Warding Temple served as the wandering and unaffiliated Deva's shield. But as they rushed toward it, those runaway deities and sages were startled to find themselves blocked by invisible barriers. Their eyes widened in fright. Base and low ant, don't even dream of escaping. The Heaven Warding Temple will never shelter you. Another Titan's voice echoed from the sky, startling the runaway deities before gargantuan human palms descended to swat them all. The legions of runaway deities and sages burst into blood fog, leaving neither flesh nor soul behind. Renegades and descendants of the treacherous, hold still and await judgment. The day of reckoning has come. A third Titan's voice thundered, nailing all on the ground and preventing Devas, spirits, and the humans within the lot to seek an escape road. Although the Titan race's breeding abilities were extremely low, with billions of years of time, hiding, and no internal strife, the Titan domain still produced millions of citizens. The sheer quantity of deities at their disposal outpaced heaven and hell combined by an enormous margin. With the foreign experts' assistance, their strength rose to absurd heights, exceeding anything the elite of heaven and hell could imagine. At first, following the appearance of the Thonian Primogen and the unshackling of the Devas and demons, the Titans lost hope. Owning hundreds of half-step legendary gods didn't alter the fact that quantity couldn't make up for quality. With their lost Tao inheritances, they couldn't openly challenge heaven and hell. At best, they could carry on with their guerrilla warfare while seeking new opportunities. Never did they expect that at that time, 200 foreign titans would appear to bolster their ranks and lead them into a succession of breakthroughs with mind-boggling resources. Now, the foreigners aside, the leadership of the Titan domain comprised more than 700 legendary gods, with 400 at the early stage, 200 at the mid-stage, 100 at the late stage, and 33 at the peak. With that strength, throughout the higher realms, who could oppose them? Flattening the celestial realm was but a start. Right afterward, hell would follow. The team dispatched to the Radiant Light Mountain, and the Eternal Void sect vanished, reappearing alongside the main battalion that stood hidden within the Sea Dream Temple sky. Like a masterfully trained force, their battalion descended. More than 300 titans, high of more than 10 kilometers, dropped from heaven's sky to surround the Sea Dream Temple. Each boasted 9 heads and 18 arms, rippling with a horrendous suppression force that announced the arrival of bloodthirsty tyrants. Is this a way to treat esteemed guests? Daksha, roll out to greet your in-laws. The titan at the helm, a middle-aged man with long, jet-black hair and a blood-red bindi-like mark on his forehead, snarled. High of more than 18 kilometers, he was undoubtedly the tallest of the group, lording above the rest with not only his startling stature, but a peak-stage legendary god cultivation base. As he spoke, the dreadful war, truth, and fate laws rippling around his form sent cracks into the mountains supporting the Sea Dream Temple. The sect shook with massive tremors. He was the Titan Lord, the first god of war's grandson, and Daksha's nephew-in-law. In that distant past, following his grandfather's death, a bastard aunt of his with an impure bloodline rejected the Titan domain for Daksha's arms, thereby becoming one of the first Maras. Unfortunately, that shameful creature died in a realm war. Otherwise, he'd also put her to trial. No answer came from Daksha. Instead, it was the 5 Mara elders who rose to meet the invaders while Ruthi observed the scene from within the Cardinal Hall, both sides ready to activate the sect's formations. Bisaran Samal, the Sea Dream Temple is no place for you to run amok. The former law enforcement elder, who'd now broken through to the early stage of the legendary god rank, snapped at the Titan Lord. Though he couldn't accurately estimate the other party's current strength and couldn't comprehend how it so suddenly stood beyond even his early-stage legendary god eyes, there was no way he could show weakness within his sect. Alas, he'd clearly picked the wrong day to show backbones. Impudent renegade. Instead of kneeling before your lord and pleading leniency, you have the gals to talk back? Death. Bisaran, the Titan Lord, proclaimed and raised his hand, shattering the former law enforcement elder's fate standard in one move. His pupils dilated, and he tumbled onto the ground. Low-breed scoundrels, all of you, deserve to die. Chapter 529, Myriad Dreams Valley vs. Titan Domain Part 1. Peak Stage, Legendary God? With what sorcery? The 4 remaining Mara elders wondered in fright. According to their best knowledge, Bisaran had always been a half-step legendary god, having been at that level for billions of years. If someone told them that he miraculously obtained a new Dao inheritance, allowing him to break through to the early-stage legendary god rank, they could accept it. An unparalleled fortuitous encounter that directly propulsed him to the mid-stage? Far-fetched, but why not? But peak stage? Even if his time chambers could make time flow 10,000 times faster, that simply wasn't possible. And yet, that truth stood before their eyes. If they knew that Bisaran had already reached fate and truth-wielding, perhaps their state of mind would be even more chaotic. Unfortunately, he'd already achieved war embodiment. Otherwise, the opportunity to pursue embodiment in a primal law would stand ahead of him. But in the current situation, that mattered not. As far as Bisaran was concerned, the Sea Dream Temple was a den of fleas whose best effort couldn't stop his middle finger. Activate the formations. The remaining elders said in tandem, coordinating with Ruthi to activate the Sea Dream Temple's defensive formations. Hundreds of light pillars soared from various corners of the Sea Dream Temple, condensing 10,000 gleaming magenta gates swirling around one 15 kilometers tall citadel. From that citadel, the choir of angels rang, booming in the Titans' minds and assailing them with mind-numbing illusions. While the phantasmal blows assailed the Titans' minds, the gates opened, releasing millions of magenta shards that streaked through the air, hurtling at the invading Titans. Seeing this, the Titan Lord sneered, and as his peers dispelled the illusion, he swept the air with a horizontal hand wave of one of his 18 arms, releasing a formless gush of truth laws that stopped the millions of magenta shards mid-flight. Nonsensical display. The Titan Lord scoffed and clenched his hand, causing the shards to burst into light particles. Seeing this, the elders despaired. Though a top 8-star god formation, their guarding citadel could at best repel the casual offensive of a peak-stage legendary god. Counting on it to oppose the Titan Lord's murderous might was a pipe dream. And even if it could protect them, a formation of that level consumed a tremendous quantity of god jades. How long could they endure before their reserves became a dry desert? There was no road to survival, but if knowing was one thing, accepting was another. With soaring determination, the Mara elders flew toward the citadel, merging with it to trigger its strongest blow. A 100 meters wide magenta orb of pure god force condensed before the guarding citadel, releasing a dazzling god force beam that barreled into the Titan Lord. Presumptuous fleas. The Titan Lord scoffed and stretched out one of his 18 indexes toward the incoming beam. In a resounding explosion, the beam collided with his index, but instead of blasting him into smithereens, it stopped right there. With a sneer, the Titan Lord filliped the beam, sending it rolling back at the citadel. The magenta beam slammed right into the citadel, sending it flying backward in a dazzling burst of magenta light. Even with the citadel's protection, of the 4 Mar elders hiding within, only the legendary god managed to withstand the impact. The rest perished on the spot. Demons? Devas? Joke. So much for the higher realms. So much for a cardinal sect. To think that for you measly fleas, I deigned personally lead our forces, what a joke. The Titan Lord bellowed, clenched his fists, and joined them in a soundless bump. Innate skill. Sovereign authority. As those words left the Titan Lord's lips, a tyrannical force crashed onto the entirety of the Sea Dream domain, putting all devas, spirits, and humans on their knees, without any means to resist. Worse, the citadel collapsed, bursting into light particles alongside the elder remaining within. Titans were not born equal, and although it increased with their cultivation level, the size of their true form determined the height of their bloodline level. And while Titans all possessed an innate, tyrannical air that commanded the subservience of lesser individuals, sovereign authority was an innate skill unique to the strongest Titan bloods, allowing them to crush the will and enforce the submission of all unable to resist it. When displayed by the Titan Lord, even legendary gods could only drop on their knees and await judgment. And as its might unfurled, Rathi looked toward the Myriad Dreams Valley, wondering why Conrad's subordinates weren't making their move. Her face contorted into a frown. Death? The Titan Lord's tyrannical command echoed, forcing all across the Titan domain to feel the threat of destruction fill their minds. In that instant, none doubted that if no one rose to resist the command, the trillions of lives within the Sea Dream domain would perish without exception. All shivered in fright, and as if struggling in an internal choice, Rathi closed her eyes. For her, stopping that move required no effort. But if she did, concealing her identity was impossible. Therefore, she chose to let it play out. At worst, this body died. Such an outcome would have no consequence on her true self. But at that time, the mist surrounding the Myriad Dreams Valley expanded, wrapping the Sea Dream Temple and the invading Titans at one fell swoop. From the Myriad Dreams Valley, 12 dark purple rays emerged, crossing the air to stop before the Titan Lord. The dark light dispersed, revealing 12 figures clad in various assortments of dark yet regal Thonian armors. The 12 Thonian Dragon Dukes. And as soon as they appeared, their devil force unfurled, crashing into the Titan Lord's sovereign authority and squashing it in a heartbeat. Apologies for the delay. The Sea Dream Temple is the territory of His Majesty. Since you're so kind as to offer yourselves as fertilizers, we might as well make a good use of you. Wolfgang jested, and in tandem the 12 dukes assumed their true form, becoming gargantuan Thonian dragons and bearing their claws at the Titans. At their back, a detachment of the secret forces made their move, breaking and surrounding the 300 Titans in smaller groups to carry out a slaughter. The first battle between the Titan domain and the Myriad Dreams Valley thus began. But as that earth-shaking collision began, within the Titan domain, a golden-haired man observed the clouding mist with rapt attention, and when the first Titan's life plate broke, he stepped forward, descending onto the celestial world to assail the Myriad Dreams Valley. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.